from Enterprise Center before Game 6 on 101 ESPN.
They did their job at home, and now it's our turn.
Ferrario holds it in. Butch David center. Miss Thomas. Now Fowler with a shot. Rebound and score! Butch David snaps the stick to the glass. It bounced off his leg, I believe. And the St. Louis Blues have taken a 1-0 lead. 48 seconds into the first period. Neighbors down low. Ferrario centering, and it's blocked. He scores!
Yeah, it was quite the final stretch here to get to this to where we are now, and 3 games in now, just feeling that this environment and that energy, and it's special, and we've worked hard to get here, and now our focus is just sticking to the plan, one game at a time. And
bring out the Zamboni. The Blues have tied the series 2-2.
We're the Nightmares. Shut them out, Jordan. Shut him out, baby! Let's go Blues!
John Gruden, as we enter game number 6, facing elimination. Be the Nightmare, baby, with Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. It is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN, live from Enterprise Center, where the Blues are on the ice for morning skate prior to game number 6. Do or die tonight for this Blues team, T-Bone. And the Blues have been in this situation plenty of times this season. When you come home, a place that they've been so successful at all year long, specifically from the Four Nations to the end of the regular season. And after dropping game number 5, once again, backs are against the wall, facing this elimination scenario of a Winnipeg Jets team that is banged up. But I'll say this, it feels like a confident situation. The Blues have played their best hockey this season with their backs against the wall. You go at the end of the regular season, they lost the 3 road games, needed to win so that destiny wasn't in Calgary's hands to try and get into the playoffs, and the Blues shellacked the Utah Hockey Club. They were on the road, lose game 1 and 2. No, you can't afford to go down 3-0 in a series, and they beat both Winnipeg Jets in 3 and 4, and then chase Connor Hellebuyck in both of those games. And once again, back on home ice, facing backs against the wall. It feels like this is a scenario the Blues thrive in.
Yeah, it really does. They've been great since the Four Nations break, and especially here in this building at Enterprise Center, 14-0-1 since the Four Nations break, including those 2 playoff games, wins in games 3 and 4. Look, they've been playing playoff hockey. We've talked about it since that Four Nations break when we counted them out, and they thrive in this situation. I'm fascinated to see how they come out tonight. This arena is going to be buzzing like it was in games 3 and 4, and the Blues should be the ones that are able to set the tone. That felt like they didn't get to that in game number 5. They never really took that arena, I would say, out of that game, and that's going to be the key tonight. Make sure the Jets don't take the fans out of it here. You get off to that quick start, and you hopefully end up finding a way to force a game number 7 in Winnipeg. Even though the Blues are facing elimination, it feels like the team that's still under pressure the most is the Winnipeg Jets.
It absolutely does in every element. We're going to go into the nuggets of this one today on the show. Mike McKenna is going to come on with us. We'll maybe hear from Jim Montgomery and Scott Arniel as they're speaking with the media a little bit later on. But it does feel like the pressure is still on Winnipeg. We heard the pre- and post-game host for the Jets a couple of days ago on TMA say, look, it's Stanley Cup or bust for this team right now. And even with a 3-2 series lead, and we have not seen many Game 7s in the playoffs. The only Game 7 that is taking place is Colorado and Dallas because Colorado forced it last night. But Winnipeg just does not have success in elimination type scenarios. They finally got off the schneid of getting a win after a loss for game number 5, something they haven't done since 2019. But on home ice, where this Blues team, their offense has been through the roof so far since the Four Nations break in that 14-0 run that they've done on home ice, T-Bone. This Blues team has outscored their opponent 69-25, and they average 4.92 goals per game on home ice in this 14-game win streak on home ice. And in their last 5 wins, they've scored 5 or more goals every single game. So for the Blues, this is the ideal scenario of coming on home ice after a rough game, facing elimination, where the fans have been part of the reason that the Blues have got that offense rolling.
Yeah, and offensively, when they are rolling like that, and I know we'll dive more into this as the show goes along, but it's when they get all four lines rolling, right? And that was the problem for them, that really their top six didn't get going in that last game. It's going to be critical, and that third line was absent. They just had no offense really at 5-on-5 in the last game in Winnipeg, and that's what's led to Jim Montgomery deciding to change things up tonight. We discussed it on the show. Would they maybe change the top six at all going into this game? They decided to keep the top six the same here at morning skate today, but they did make one lineup change, it looks like. We'll see what Jim Montgomery has to say. We know he likes to play mind games, so I'll probably say this, and then Texier will be back in, but it looks like they're going to pull out Texier and put Joseph on that third line, which was something I didn't know if they would do or not. I thought maybe Jim Montgomery would stick with what's gotten them back into this series, because ever since he went back to Texier on that third line, they've been 2-1. So I'm a little surprised by the lineup change. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I thought they were going to stick with Texier because he's given them a little bit more in the 3 games than Joseph did in the first 2.
I like the decision, and Joseph was skating with Sundqvist and Bolduc. All of the other line combinations were the same, so no tinfoils of does Matt Kessel get in. Tyler Tucker was not on the ice, so you can't worry about him coming into this one. The only change that you could go with is Matthew Joseph. And look, I've been negative about Matthew in a couple of scenarios this season, and he's only played 1 game in this postseason for the Blues, and it just wasn't the greatest game for him. And so I understand the move here. You expect it to be a physical presence for both sides, specifically after what took place in game number 5. And Matthew Joseph is a fresh body. And right now, you're just not getting anything from that third line. Not saying that Joseph is going to come in and be a world beater and provide you a lot of offense, but the best chemistry that you've had this season with Sundqvist and Bolduc was Matthew Joseph. Texier was good in spurts, but he just wasn't very present in that game number 5, and so you put Matthew Joseph in. That brings a little physical presence, can forecheck, can create offensive zone time, and brings a little nastiness, which I think is what you need right now in a elimination scenario.
Yeah, I find it surprising because of what we've been talking about, which is, hey, Joseph was kind of a guy that, even though Texier wasn't noticeable in that last game, Joseph wasn't that for really 2 straight games.
Yeah.
And though I agree with want to bring some of that physicality, I wonder how much do you really need that in going into a Game 6, and I know we'll talk a little bit about the physical play in this one later on in the show today, but I was a little surprised by this. I would have thought you would stick with Texier on that line. I mean, their expected goals for percentage was 50%. Now, granted, that's not great, but it is better than what it was when they had Joseph on that line. So I'm a little surprised by this decision by Jim Montgomery. I'm not surprised he didn't break up the top 6. I know we kind of talked about that idea yesterday. I thought maybe you would consider flipping Cairo and Snuggerud, and he decided not to do that. I think he's decided, you know what, these are our lines. We just need them to be playing a little bit better. And the second line hasn't been bad when you look at a peek under the hood at their 5-on-5 numbers. They're just not finishing right now. But deciding to go with Texier here in this with Joseph in this big game, look, maybe you just hope for that spark. Get that fire. You've been sitting up here in the press box with us media members. We're not that cool. We're not as fun as being on the ice for the playoffs. So maybe that's the thing that you get that fire from them, hopefully for a game, hopefully 2. Start to get some offense from that third line.
Yeah, I think it's more fresh legs than anything. I mean, Texier's played a couple of games, and again, he was very noticeable in game number 4. I thought he was part of the reason that Tyler Tucker goal took place. He won the puck battle, but he didn't do it in game number 5. And I think if you're Jim Montgomery, you make changes where you can make changes. And switching out a third liner with another third liner doesn't do much, but it does provide a little bit more of re-sparking some chemistry, I guess, if it's right there. And look, the game that he played, which I guess was game number 1 of this series, 11 minutes and 17 seconds, and had 10 penalty minutes, had 1 shot on goal, 2 shot attempts, didn't do much, but he had 4 hits and a blocked shot in this one. If anything, you're just hoping he can bring back some consistency to the line combinations. Because the one thing that hurt him in the last game, T-Bone, was the inability to roll the 4 lines. When Sundqvist and Texier and Bolduc weren't running for you, then you start have to shortening the shifts a little bit, juggling up the lines. You hopefully can get back to rolling 4 lines in this one. And the other positive on this is you have the matchups. Yeah. You don't have to worry about mismatches of Matthew Joseph or Texier on the ice. You get to put them out there in ideal situations.
Yeah, and that is going to be key tonight. And as we've seen, it's funny, Montgomery said, I think it was before Game 3 when we were out here, hey, I'm not much of a matchups coach unless things aren't going. We prefer to be rolling 4 lines. And yet you look at it, and the home team who's had the matchups has held serve so far through the first 5 games. But it is a good point because now you can put that third line in better situations, right? You don't get caught with them in potentially a spot where you don't like the matchup where Winnipeg can counter with maybe the first line, for example. So it'll be interesting to see how Monty uses them because you're right. When the Blues are playing their best, not only are the defensemen getting involved offensively, but they are rolling 4 lines consistently. And we talked about this yesterday. I said, well, hey, do you maybe then use the fourth line as really the third line, and the third line kind of smooths in that role? And you said, well, you hope not. You hope that you don't have to worry about that because if you're rolling 4 lines, that means the Blues are buzzing, and that means you, ideally, or in theory, I should say, are playing your best style of hockey in this elimination game tonight.
So right now looks to be Matthew Joseph in the lineup. Jim Montgomery has yet to talk to the media. When we get confirmation on that one, that's where the Blues can we'll give you the confirmation if he's playing. But that was the line shift earlier today. Joseph was with Sundqvist and Bolduc for morning skate. Top 6 stayed the same. The defense stayed the same. Suter and Leddy was your third pair, and of course Jordan Binnington in between the pipes. On the other side is a guy who, yes, he's been good on home ice for the Winnipeg Jets, but is Connor Hellebuyck's road struggles still going to be the storyline of this series? That, and can the Blues take advantage of the matchup with no top centerman of the Winnipeg Jets? All of that we'll get into next here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
A 5-1 win after chasing Hellebuyck for the second straight game.
So that was from game number 4. Connor Hellebuyck, of course, being pulled both times on the road, and it's been an area that still will be talked about. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario, back here on BK and Ferrario, 101 ESPN. By the way, we're live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Our studio cam is brought to you by Air Alliance Team. You can hop on over on the Graveyard chat there. Also, our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. To me, T-Bone, the Blues facing elimination, how they've played on home ice, it's a big storyline. But the storyline will continue to be Connor Hellebuyck's road struggles. He's 5-14 in the postseason and has lost his last 6 starts on the road with an inflated 4.83 goals against average since the 2021 postseason. So 19 games since 2021 in the playoffs, and Connor Hellebuyck is 5-14 on the road in the postseason, and he's allowed in his last 5 games 4 or more goals on the road. So we can talk about all of the different storylines, but to me, this is where the Blues can exploit Winnipeg and force a Game 7 by continuing to get into the head of the guy who knows he hasn't been good on the road.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. We both agreed he was fine in the last game. Right?
Yeah.
He wasn't great.
Felt like game 2.
Yeah, so it's not like he's coming here to St. Louis with maybe the utmost confidence, right? And if you can get to him early, you have to think he's going to start thinking again, oh boy, here we go again. And if it's not him, because goalies are mentally strong, then you have to think that the coaching staff or even maybe the other guys in front of him are going to be thinking, oh boy, Connor's having another night here on the road. And look, I think that's him down there on the ice. I think he's practicing sitting on the bench already, just in case to get pulled.
Okay, come on, man.
That too much? Would it be too much to chant Connor already? Would it be too much to chant Connor already?
Probably, because we're the only guys in the building. We could all point to Doty and tell them that it was Doty that was chanting that one. Let me correct myself real quick. I said 5-14 on the road in the playoffs. He's 5-14 overall in the playoffs. On the road, he's 1-6 with an .845 save percentage, a 4.94 goals against average. And that's just the thing. He's been so good on home ice for Winnipeg all season, but in the playoffs, it hasn't really felt like he was the guy that is in conversation for the Hart Trophy. But a lot of this comes down to how Winnipeg plays. We had Ryan Didoshak on earlier this week, a Winnipeg Jets perspective, and he's right. Like, when Connor Hellebuyck has looked good in the postseason, it's because Winnipeg has looked great in the postseason. But the difference has been on the road, and whether it's been the matchups, however you want to call it, the momentum built from the fans, that's where you can expose Connor Hellebuyck. When you get Winnipeg's defense to start kind of flurrying around on the ice, that's where the Blues seem to be able to exploit Connor Hellebuyck. And on the road, that's a weakness for Winnipeg. I don't know what the conversations have been. You're not going to pull the goaltender, you're not going to start your backup goaltender on the road in this game. But I have to wonder if there was at least conversations about it of like, hey, we're not going to be eliminated tonight. Do we go to Eric Comrie, who's been good on the road? But either way, it tells you the fragility of Winnipeg.
Yeah, I think it would have became a serious conversation had they lost the last game, Game 5. I think you continue to ride your horse in Connor Hellebuyck. But to your point on the kind of the structure for the Winnipeg Jets, and you really saw it here in St. Louis, and I think it was Mike who we'll talk to in the 12 o'clock hour today. When we talked to him last week, I think he was the one who told us, like, when you look at Connor Hellebuyck, he doesn't make that big-time save when you're looking for it, right? When you think of some of the saves Jordan Bennington has made, he's been making the saves that have been kind of the long-range shots, right? The easier, not high danger. He's been making the saves that you expect your goaltender to make, but he's also made a couple where it is, okay, that might be the momentum turner. I'm thinking to the one he made I think it was a 3-on-1 in the last game, where he slides over to his left, kind of predicts it correctly, makes the glove save, and you thought, okay, maybe the Blues take advantage of that. They ultimately did not, but if the Blues did come back in that game, you were going to circle that save. Okay, Bennington kept that. I don't remember if it was a 1-goal or 2-goal game at that point, but he kept us in this hockey game. You look at what Hellebuyck's been in this series, according to Money Puck, goals save above expected, a -7.1. So what that tells me is he's just not finding that big save that the Winnipeg Jets need. He's done a decent job of saving anything that's been from distance that's not high danger, but when you need that one save that, especially in an arena like this tonight that's going to be rocking, that could potentially prevent the crowd from really getting into it, especially early on, he hasn't been making that save. He's not made the phenomenal save outside the one with Sundqvist in Game 4, or excuse me, in Game 5. where he stuck the paddle out there and it just happened to hit the stick. That's really the only big save that I can remember that he has made. And then in games, I think it was game one or two breakaway saves on Kyrou. He just hasn't made a ton of high-danger saves that feel like they can turn momentum on a hockey game.
Yeah, well, and the other factor now that Winnipeg has to plan for, and they're about to take the ice for their morning skate, is the Blues taking advantage of matchups tonight on home ice without Mark Scheifele. So the Jets, of course, don't have their associate captain who didn't fly with them after that hit from Braden Shen, and he's played every single game this season for Winnipeg, so you don't really have many numbers to go off of to when they haven't been together. But last season, he missed 8 games in January to February, and in that time frame, the depth of scoring did not show up. Now, I understand I'm making the statement, and it was last season in the regular season, but without Mark Scheifele, the Winnipeg Jets had 11 total goals in the 8 games that they did not have Mark Scheifele on the ice, and of those 11, only 3 came from Connor and Velarde. So, yes, they'll put Nemesnikov up top. Yes, you'll see that depth of scoring that they got going in game number 5. But, T-Bone, tonight's really going to be about how do the Blues take advantage of these matchups, because without Mark Scheifele, you wonder where the offense is going to come for Winnipeg.
Yeah, and I would hope that, or I would think the Blues' hope is that they can really get that top line, whether it be the top line or the second line, whichever one they feel is buzzing, because now I don't know if you're going to, and maybe you feel differently here, I don't know if you're going to match up to say, okay, how do we stop them is more for me of, okay, how do we take advantage that they don't have their number one center to shut down our offense? So whichever line they think the Blues and Jim Montgomery think will be best suited for that, whether it be the Thomas line or maybe they like what the Shen line has done at 5-on-5, maybe they try and match them up against it. But you've got to take advantage of that. You've got to find a way to be able to score on that top line and really shut them down, because now that they've basically got what was their third line center up on the top line, you can't let that line beat you. And that was the line that ended up surprising us in game number 5.
Yeah.
And they played very well once Scheifele went out after that first period. And you saw, that is something that cannot sustain. If they are going to get that kind of production from the top line without Scheifele, then the Blues will probably be going home tonight.
Yeah, from the 7:03, guys, Winnipeg kicked our butts without Mark Scheifele a couple of nights ago. Yeah, they did, and that's what you're going to have to avoid. I would imagine Jim Montgomery is making sure that locker room isn't thinking, and I don't even expect that they would be because these guys are professionals. You can't look at this as, they're without one of their best players and their top centerman. This should be an easier game for us. Nemesnikov looked good on that line, but that was for 1.5, 2 periods versus an entire game where you're game planning for this one, and that's really what the game plan comes down to. I will say this, Velarde is an engine. He gets things to go. The centerman just needs to continue to drive the puck north, which Nemesnikov can do, but what it is, it's a trickle-down effect. We saw the depth of scoring work out for them, but T-Bone, before Velarde was in the lineup for Winnipeg in games 1 through 4, we didn't see that depth of scoring, and it was because you saw the lines being broken up. Iafallo had to move up, so you're using fourth-line guys playing on the third line. That's the effect of not having a guy in that line chemistry. We've seen it with Dylan Holloway.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why we'll see what they can do with their depth of scoring tonight. Their coach had mentioned, I think yesterday before they got on the plane to St. Louis here, hey, we need to make sure that our 4 lines are rolling. And you're right, they had some struggles doing that. We talked about it going into Game 3 when I was with you for pregame. The Jets, really outside the top line, hadn't been beating the Blues at 5-on-5, and that is something that you cannot allow to happen again tonight. You're going to have to find a way. I would expect the Blues' depth of scoring, if they can get this third line going and Joseph provides a spark, now you should be able to roll the 4 lines, and the Jets will see, but I would think that they're going to have some struggles with that now that they're without Scheifele.
Well, and we do have a little bit of news to pass along. Murat Ates, the Winnipeg Jets insider for The Athletic, tweeting out moments ago, Nikolai Ehlers is taking the morning skate wearing a regular jersey. Murat says, I expect Ehlers' return imminent. Does that mean he plays in Game 6? Does that mean they wait for Game 7? We'll pass along any information we get from Scott Arneal as the morning skate starts up for the Winnipeg Jets. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We are here at Enterprise Center prior to Game number 6. Fastlane will be out here as well from 2 to 6 o'clock, and then all of our pregame coverage begins at 6 right here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. Down the street tonight, the Cardinals open up a series against the Mets. We'll talk about them splitting the series in Cincinnati against the Reds with BT next here on 101 ESPN.
for Game 6 on 101 ESPN. We're hanging with Brad Thompson on 101 ESPN.
Hanging breaking ball from Brad Thompson. And boy, does he get a swing on it. Lift and separate and see you later.
Hanging with BT is sponsored by St. Luke's, ranked top 2% in the nation for cardiac surgery by Health Grades. Visit stlukes-stl.com.
Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. No BK today as he is on vacation out in Pittsburgh. He will be back on Monday. We are here at Enterprise Center getting ready for game number 6 tonight between the Blues and Winnipeg Jets, as the Jets are out here for morning skate right now. Blues just wrapped up. It is confirmed. Looks like Matthew Joseph will be in the lineup tonight. Down the street later on this evening, the Cardinals will be opening up a 3-game set against the New York Mets. And back from Cincinnati, joining us now on our Collier and Thompson phone line. Every Friday, we get to catch up with Cardinals broadcaster Brad Thompson. BT, fresh off of a rain delay back in St. Louis. How are you, buddy?
Well, getting ready for another rain delay, probably at some point during this weekend. Chances are. I'm doing great, man. Hey, I got a 2-part question for you, Alex, because, I mean, you're a pro. You've been doing this for a long time. One, who takes a vacation during the Stanley Cup playoffs? And 2, who does it in Pittsburgh?
Fair question on both fronts. Playoffs, I couldn't believe he took it. Secondary, he went to Pittsburgh to see a Pirates game, but the last time he went, BT, not only did the Pirates game get rained out, but the bridge, the Roberto Clemente Bridge, got closed down while he was out there. So pretty much every time he does something, it pretty much ends in disaster.
Wolf, he wasn't there this past weekend, was he?
No, he wasn't. But you know what? I think he was planning their trip, which is probably why all of the rain has been taking place and why it's in St. Louis right now.
All right. Well, fair enough. Well, either way, we miss him. I hope he has a great vacation. I got a feeling that the energy downtown tonight is going to be outstanding.
I am absolutely with you, BT, and of course with this Blues playoff game taking place. But look, with the Mets in town, and I know the Mets got the best of the Cardinals in their last matchup, but this has been the area of expertise for the Cardinals this season. When they've been at Busch Stadium, they have been a completely different team than what they've been on the road. And frankly, coming off of a series split with the Cincinnati Reds, with winning the series against the Brewers, starting to feel at least a little bit more positive vibes with this team.
Yeah, you hope so, right? You hope to just build off what you have. It was kind of a disappointing way to finish it off. It stunk that the rain hit and shortened Matthew Liberatore's start yesterday, and then the Reds took over off the bullpen of the Cardinals. But, yeah, you're right, man. 10-5 at home so far. It's the 8th time that they've won 10 or more home games before May in the history of the franchise. So pretty impressive, the start there. And tonight's starter, Sonny Gray, has been historically good. I think he's 5th all-time as far as Cardinal starters go when it comes to their first 20 starts at Busch Stadium. So all of those things line up really well until you hit the fact that the Mets are the hottest team in baseball. They're 20-11, and these guys are ridiculous. So you hope that there's a little bit of payback in store. You know, this team has been playing some motivated baseball. They're playing good baseball, but they're still figuring out ways to win games against good teams, and they're going to have to figure out some ways here in this 3-game set against the Mets.
And BT, one thing that is noticeable from the Cardinals from this year compared to last year is with runners in scoring position. Going into yesterday, they were top 5 in average on-base slug and OPS. What have you seen differently from the Cardinals compared from last year when they had their struggles with runners in scoring position to this year?
I think for me, Tanner, it's the lack of panic. To me, it's having a plan and having an approach. Like last year, I'm not to say they didn't have a plan, because you always have a plan when you go up there, but it seemed like they were just the runners in scoring position. I know we've talked about this before, but I think it became a thing. And then all of a sudden, everybody, when you got in one of those spots, you're gripping the bat a little bit tighter and you're trying to do a little bit more and you're putting that pressure on yourself. Right now, whether there's runners in scoring position or it is nobody out, nobody on, I think you're seeing a very consistent approach, and these guys have a great knowledge, and credit to them for digging in and doing the work, and credit to Brant Brown and the coaching staff for preparing these guys. they have a great idea of how they're going to be attacked, and they have a great idea of what their plan of attack should be like. And I think that we're seeing them do a far better job this year of actually implementing it, right? It's easy to have an idea of what you want to do. It's easy to go out there and think, okay, this is what's going to happen. But to be able to go out and do it is a big difference. So, I mean, to your point, last year I think it was 229, maybe the average with runners in scoring position, up to 268. That's sixth in baseball right now. That's a significant jump, and it can still get a lot better. There's still some guys that can take more consistent at-bats.
We're talking with Brad Thompson of FanDuel Sports Midwest, former Cardinals pitcher, with us here on BK and Ferrario. And BT, speaking of that runners in scoring position, it's got to feel positive if you're the Cardinals when you look at the individuals who are having success in those scenarios. Ivan Herrera, in the small sample size before his injury, was hitting 500, but Brendan Donovan, Victor Scott, Lars Nootbaar, these are all guys in the top conversations of runners in scoring position for the Cardinals and having success.
Well, and I think a lot of that, to your point, Alex, is reps, right? It's reps and confidence. And I'll use Victor Scott II as an example because I think that he's a guy that has taken the biggest strides from year to year, from last year to this year. He just looks so settled in the box right now. And his hands aren't moving a lot. His body's not moving a ton. His timing is perfect, and he's just trusting his hands. And if there's a time for him to put a big swing on the ball, he'll do that. We've seen him. But when there's a time to just get the barrel to it and go the other direction, he'll do that too. So I agree with you. I think that that's very encouraging to see these young guys, these guys that are you hope to be part of your nucleus going forward, that are taking those strides. Because at the end of the day, that's what 2025 is going to be about. Whether you end up making the postseason, I hope they do, I hope they go on a run, or you don't, it's about finding out what you have for the future, and are these guys getting better and better in all aspects of the game. But hitting with runners in scoring position is a huge aspect of the game. I mean, this is how you figure out ways to win games. How many times did we watch games last year, guys, where it was a runner on second, nobody out, and that guy didn't come in? And it didn't look like there was any approach. It didn't look like there was a thought to go to right field or hit a ground ball to the right side to get the guy over. At times, and I'm not saying they were selfish, but it looked like selfish at-bats at times. I don't think you're seeing those as much now.
BT, I did want to ask you a kind of big picture pitching question, and I want to go to what Miles Mikolas had to say in that series with the Cincinnati Reds. He was asked about the Cardinals kind of continuing to go to this six-man rotation when they get into kind of a 13-game stretch in 13 days. And he said, hey, I kind of like it. It continues to give us 5 days off, gives us an extra bullpen session to kind of grip it and rip it and work on our stuff. Do you think this is going to be not just something that the Cardinals continue to implement as the season goes along when they get into kind of a 13-game and 13-day type of stretch, but do you think this is going to be something we're going to see a lot of baseball teams across Major League Baseball try and implement?
I think early in the season, it's a good thing to implement to keep everybody healthy. You guys know how hard it is to get through 162 games with your 5 starters. I mean, it doesn't happen very often. There's injuries and whatnot. But I like being able to build in some rest, and I like the way that Miles Mikolas broke it down of being able to, on your start day, maybe do a little bit more, maybe go a little bit further. On your bullpen session day, work on something. On your workout days, really dig into those more early in the season. I don't know necessarily if it's sustainable to do throughout the season. I just know this. If I'm a team that has 1 or 2 or 3 guys that you're paying $15, $20, $30 million. I want them pitching every 5th day. Like, I want my aces to pitch every 5th day. Now, I'm still going to listen to them, and I want them to listen to their bodies. And when they need extra days, I would need to know about it. But I don't necessarily think that is the evolution of how people are going to go about it. One thing that I do believe still firmly is important is having not even just one, like having multiple guys in your bullpen that can give you length, and not just length like eat up innings, that the quote unquote mop up guy. I think that guy is out of baseball. Good thing I'm out of baseball too. The idea of bridging that gap. Starter gives you 5, somebody who can give you 6, 7. If you got the lead, he can give you 6, 7, 8. Like, I feel like that's really important, and you feel the difference. And I love what Steven Matz has been able to do in his couple of starts. I thought he did a fantastic job in his 4 strong. They could have pushed him further, but it was the longest pitch count he had. And I would like to hit on Graceffo in a second too, but the idea of having guys like that, like you notice a difference in your bullpen when Matz is in the rotation. Like you have to do things a little bit different because you don't have that bridge guy.
And that's where I was going to go next, BT. I mean, it's no secret the middle of that bullpen this season has been roughed up. We saw it with Swanson and O'Brien and John King yesterday. But, you know, Leahy has been great. Maton's been great. Helsley's been the guy you'd expect him to be. And when roles kind of settle down, when you get through all of these games that have been piled together, you could see a guy like Steven Matz move into a high leverage, or maybe you get multiple innings from him out of that bullpen. And then Gordon Graceffo as well. These are guys that it feels like can settle down the bullpen and what we've been talking about this season.
I agree. And, like, for me, Steven Matz right now, the way that he is throwing the ball, if I am a team that is in need of a starter, I'm calling for sure right now to see what the Cardinals need. And I'm certain there will be plenty of calls at the deadline. The reason that they gave him the 4-year, $44 million deal in the first place, coming off the heels of what he did in Toronto, because he's talented. His body just hasn't let him do it. This year he looks healthy. But I totally agree with you that is important, that he could serve a massive role there and being a bridge-type guy. And I really, maybe like almost even an Andrew Miller hybrid role, right? Maybe the stuff isn't quite as dominant as Andrew Miller was when he was with the Cleveland Indians at the time. But I really feel like he could do that. And Graceffo, when was the last time, guys, that we've had, and I realized that it was his second time up this year, first time in Boston didn't go well, but when was the last time you saw a reliever come up for the Cardinals and you went, wow? Like, it's been a minute, right? And that's what I felt in that first inning where I'm seeing 99. I'm like, where did that come from? And then for him to be able to give you the length, he's been a starter, obviously, so him going that long, I don't know, it was eye-opening because those are some of the reports and some of those things that I was hearing from friends in the organization about Graceffo that we hadn't seen yet, and I think that he turned a lot of heads.
BT, final question from me. There's been a lot of positives. We've talked about a couple of them here in this interview today. What's been the biggest surprise to you from the St. Louis Cardinals after the first month of the season?
Well, I mean, if we can go, my positives are my biggest, and I don't want to call them surprises because it's not like I didn't believe in these guys, but I'll give you three players. Is Matthew Liberatore, what he's been able to do in the rotation. Like, they made a good decision, and not an easy decision, again, to put him in the rotation. We were just talking about what Steven Matz meant to this bullpen. Well, we saw what Libby meant to this bullpen, but they put him in the rotation anyhow because you need to find out in the future what you have. I think you've got a really good, left-handed, talented 25-year-old starter who's going to continue to get better and better. Another guy that is in the conversation right now for reliever of the month is Kyle Leahy. Like, Leahy has been dominant. He is like the same dude out there. I don't think his face moves ever. He's just ready, steady, pumping in heaters and sliders and cutters and sweepers, and just so confident. And we knew what we liked. We liked what we saw last year out of him, right? But what was the evolution going to look like? Well, he looks like he's going to be at some point eighth inning, or who knows, in the future, maybe he's one of your starters. I think that he's got that sort of arsenal. And then the other one I already hit on was Vic. I think very, very impressed and surprised the jump that he was able to take. And on the flip side of things that I want to see, like, you need to see Arenado going. Like, that's got to happen. Last couple of weeks, he hasn't hit his stride. And same thing with your two young bucks that you're trying to learn a lot about, Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman. Like, those guys are going to get the runway, quote unquote, but they have to take advantage of it, and would like to see just more consistent at-bats. I love what Walk has done in the outfield. He scorched a couple of balls the other night, by the way. I think 112.3 off the bat and 113. The 113 was a 2 RBI double. But just want to see the continued growth for them, because it's not just about this year. Like, you want to go into 2026 knowing you got two dudes in your lineup, so they got a lot of runway to prove that.
BT, always appreciate catching up, man. Have fun with this series this weekend, and hopefully the rain will stay away for you guys.
Hey, I appreciate it. You guys have fun tonight, and let's go Blues.
Absolutely. Brad Thompson with us every Friday here on BK and Ferrario. He is with us on the Collier and Thompson hotline. We'll get more into the Cardinals in the 12 o'clock hour, but coming up next, Ask Us Anything, 314-399-9646. We'll get to your questions for Ask Us Anything next here on 101 ESPN.
baby. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers on 101 ESPN.
Our weekly hit with former NHL goalie Mike McKenna on behalf of Macadoodles coming up in about 10 minutes. But right now, you get to ask us anything with Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Jordan Deacon, by the way, back in our 101 ESPN studios, taking care of us today. No BK as we're out here at Enterprise Center for game number 6. And some news to pass along for Ask Us Anything. Looks like it's not officially confirmed from the Winnipeg Jets, but looks like Nikolai Ehlers will be returning tonight, taking line rushes with their second line and was taking line rushes with their power play. So Nikolai Ehlers, the Winnipeg Jets don't have Mark Scheifele, but they replace it with Nikolai Ehlers, who is a heck of a weapon to have going into game number 6. We'll get more into that in about 15 minutes or so, but let's start with this one from the 618. Guys, any update on Dylan Holloway? There's been talk that he hasn't been available. Have we heard about him skating? I think we've done this before, but just to nip it in the bud once again, do not expect Dylan Holloway to return in the playoffs. Like, you have not seen him skating with the team. We have not heard if he's even skating on his own. The fact that there has been no questions, no answers about him, tells me that you cannot expect Dylan Holloway to return in this series. Even Nikolai Ehlers, who was week to week, started skating last week for the Winnipeg Jets, and it was on his own, and you started to hear about the potential of him returning. I would not plan on Nikolai Ehlers coming back in this series, even if they get to the second round.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect Holloway back. I mean, the fact that you're not hearing anything just goes to show you where things are at with him, right? And so no expectation of him being back, let alone in game 6, 7, even moving forward. Until you hear Montgomery say something or we get word whether he's practicing or not, then you can start to really ask the question. For now, the Blues just have to assume, or we have to assume, I guess, that he's not coming back anytime soon.
From the 636, who do you guys think will have most fans in tonight's attendance? Cardinals, Blues, or Battlehawks? I think it's pretty obvious. Blues are going to have the most people in here. I believe the last time I heard it was standing room only for tonight's game. The real question will be Battlehawks or Cardinals.
Yeah. I think the announced attendance will probably favor the Cardinals, but I think there might be more in the Battle Dome than there will be butts in the seats at Busch Stadium. That's what my gut tells me, because as we've seen, Cardinals fans not that thrilled with the organization right now. Understandably
so. From the 314, guys, how much of a threat will Ehlers be, who hasn't played since the end of the regular season? Personally, I think he's going to be more of a threat than what I thought Velarde was. And Velarde looked good in his first game. I mean, he was a net front presence, had the first shot on goal in that game that he returned in Game 5. Ehlers played all the way up until the end of the regular season. I think it was the second to last game that he didn't play that he ran into the official and tweaked something in his foot and did not start skating until a few days ago. What will be interesting, and this is where T-Bone and I disagree, I'm surprised they're throwing him back in there as quick as they are, because look, when you're out with an injury, there does take a little bit more time to get back to game speed. You do have to take contact. He hasn't taken any contact because he just shed his no-contact jersey a couple of days ago. But I can understand the other side. If I'm the Winnipeg Jets, get him in there. I don't know when Scheifele's returning with this injury, and I need to start building some chemistry, because if I'm Winnipeg, my sights are set on round 2.
Yeah, I like the fact that if he is skating today and they think he is good to go and you can remove the no-contact jersey, I like the fact that if I'm the Winnipeg Jets, that you would be putting him in the lineup. I don't think you kind of play it slowly. I think you try and finish this series off tonight if you're the Winnipeg Jets. I think the worst-case scenario from the Jets' perspective is having to go back home, face that pressure again of, hey, this is a Game 7. We're supposed to be the team that took care of business as the President Trophy winners. And now that you are missing Scheifele, if he can go, I think you put him in the lineup. And I know they were a little bit cautious with the previous injury. Who was it again? It was Velarde.
Velarde, yeah.
Where Arneal said I think it was available Game 3. They didn't play him. Then he came back Game 4.
He was available Game 4 and
Game
came
5.
back in Game 5.
I would have played him in Game 4. If he's healthy and ready to go, I think you put them back in the lineup. So we'll see if they confirm that he's in. But the fact that he's skating on the second line and doing the power play here at practice or at the morning skate, my expectations is he's good to go.
Yeah, I need to correct myself. Apparently, I said Ehlers will not be back in this series. I meant Dylan Holloway. Ehlers, of course, potentially back later on tonight. Final one from the 314, and we'll get to Mike McKenna on the other side. Do you guys feel like this series is trending like 2019, but for the Winnipeg Jets moving on? Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about because I guess Game 5, a team won on the road. In this series, I believe this in the Tampa Bay series, no team lost a game on home ice yet. Because the Tampa Bay Florida won in Game 6, which was in Florida, and then did not have to go to Tampa for game number 7, if I'm remembering that correctly. So, yeah, I don't think this is trending like 2019. To me, this feels like it's going to Game 7. Because you're on home ice. You've been great on home ice. I don't expect the Blues to blow Connor Hellebuyck out of the water in this game, but I expect this one to go back to Game 7, and frankly, I expect a tight game in Game 7.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is going 7, so I don't think it's like 19. And the reason I say that is even in those losses at Winnipeg in games 1 and 2, Jim Montgomery has said it. They played pretty well. It was just outside of 1 or 2 shifts that were really costly for them.
Right.
Game 5 was the first game in which you looked at the Blues and said, whoa, what happened there? Mm-hmm. They just never found their game. They never felt like they got into that hockey game until it was too late. So I think they're going to get back to their style of play today. They're going to be able to roll the 4 lines. They'll be able to feed off the energy here at their home arena. Then they'll go to Winnipeg and see if they can find a way to crack the Winnipeg Jets on the road.
All right, he's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll come back and we'll talk with Mike McKenna, get his thoughts on game number 6 here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Louis with former NHL goaltender Mike McKenna.
How do you like me now? Between the Pipes is refreshed by Macadoodle Spirits, fine wine, beer, and cigars. Now open in Darden Prairie.
Nothing better than playoff hockey. Game 6 here at Enterprise Center tonight. Along with Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario, and we get to talk playoff hockey with one of our favorites, Mike McKenna, former NHL goaltender. He joins us every Friday on behalf of Macadoodles. Mike, great to catch up with you, man. I'm sure you're just as pumped as most are in St. Louis for number 6 tonight.
Yeah, and I think even more so excited for my daughters that'll be there this evening. They're just really excited about it. So they get a good chance to go watch a game. I get a chance to be free for a little bit in the evening and watch it myself with my wife. And that's a good deal, man. I'm excited for it.
That's always a win in my book when you get an opportunity to enjoy hockey with your daughters, but also get to enjoy it with your wife. Mike, let's talk about at least the news in this one, which it does look like, again, it hasn't been confirmed, but it's basically as close to being confirmed as you can get. Nikolai Ehlers returning into this game tonight. No Mark Scheifele because of that hit from game number 5. We've seen some guys return in the series like Velarde in game 5, and now you get Nikolai Ehlers. What's the game plan when you put a guy that hasn't played since the end of the regular season in?
Well, you better be heavy on him. I mean, there's no way around it. And the Blues have been good about that. So neutralizing Ehlers is something that shouldn't be that difficult for St. Louis, given that he's coming off injury. Excuse me, but he does add another dynamic to that team that St. Louis hasn't faced. You know, this is another player, left-handed guy who shoots pretty well off the wall. He makes their power play more dynamic, just like Velarde did coming back in Game 5. So, you know, really what you're looking at now is a team that has become a little bit, in my eyes, Winnipeg, a little bit more shot-centric than they would be with Scheifele, who makes them a little bit more rush-centric just because he skates so well and he moves. But I think you just got to be heavy, man. We saw it. Winnipeg gave Colton Parayko the screws when he came back off injury, and it's not easy to do. So be all over him. Don't give him time and space, and stay out of the box so you don't have to feel the wrath on the power play.
And Mike, looking at the St. Louis Blues, Alex and I were talking about this before the show today. Jordan Kyrou doesn't have a point yet in this series at 5-on-5. What have you been seeing from him in that second line from the St. Louis Blues in this series?
Well, it's been a tough mix here. You know, we've looked to them for stability for a long time, and I think there's been such a feature on being crash bang, and Braden Schen's had so much on his plate with that getting the offense revved up and going hasn't been as simple. And what we've seen with Kyrou is that the power play has started to become special for him, which is great, and he's shooting the puck more, but we're not seeing him be able to get free on the rush as much. And that's really something that Winnipeg's good at, is defending in the neutral zone, and it keeps Kyrou from really being able to rev it up. When he plays with Robert Thomas, he's a little bit more effective that way because Thomas can make passes that no one else on the Blues can. And so you're able to put Kyrou into a better place to go retrieve pucks than he currently is. So I'm not sure the answer is just, hey, go play better or skate faster. I think it's really going to have to be a willingness to get pucks deep and get Kyrou into the right place in the offensive zone to get his shot off.
Mike, both sides have been really good on home ice in this series. Now, the Blues kept it close in Winnipeg. Winnipeg couldn't keep it close beyond the first period when they've been in St. Louis. What has stood out to you in terms of why both sides have been so dominant on home ice?
Well, the last change makes a difference. Jim Montgomery's been really good with line matching and getting the right players on the ice, and so is Winnipeg on the flip side. You know, they were able to get until Scheifele got knocked into the next zip code, they were getting him out every time they could against Thomas and the rest of the crew. You know, so I think home ice makes a difference, but I really think that you're seeing two teams that are not just feeding on the crowd, but they're feeding on the energy they've had at home, and St. Louis is no different. So, you know, when you've won 14 straight, like, you just walk into your building knowing you're going to win. And that's kind of what makes me a little bit nervous tonight about the Blues is that they have won so many in a row at home, and it's just not a given. Now you're facing a team with their back against, like, a chance to close out in Winnipeg. And Winnipeg hasn't closed one out in a while here. Like, that they're feeling it. Like, in a good way, Winnipeg is coming in on a mission. So I think the first 10 minutes of tonight's game are going to be absolutely critical. The team that's ahead or is at least, tied up after that is going to be in better shape.
Mike, as a follow-up to that, who's more dangerous in a game like this? The Blues with their backs against the wall facing elimination, or Winnipeg knowing that they don't want to go back for a Game 7?
Depends on the mentality of the team. Watching the Toronto Maple Leafs game last night, we're just waiting for them to crumble because that's what they've done. And everybody's thinking, this is it. Here we go again. Well, they finally got past that. And I do think that Winnipeg is a bit more mature team. And they've run out of gas at times in the past several years. I don't think they will this year. And I really do think there's a hunger with them it's a little different than it's been. I think Winnipeg's dangerous tonight. That's why I have some apprehension to it. That's why I'm hopeful the Blues come out and just absolutely run Winnipeg in the first 5 minutes to set the tone. They're going to have to do it tonight.
Mike, last week we talked a lot about Connor Hellebuyck with you, and of course he got pulled in the 2 games here in St. Louis. He was able to get the win on home ice. Now, he still has the road struggles that he's going to probably be thinking about coming into game number 6 here tonight. But did you feel like Connor Hellebuyck found his game in game number 5 in that win against the Blues?
I thought he looked pretty normal for himself. The one thing that I've thought he's improved upon as the series went along, even with Game 5 or Game 4 not going well for him, was that I do think he's been fighting to get more depth in his crease, especially with screen chances. I thought that was on display in Game 5. He was at the top of his crease. He wasn't allowing the play to get ahead of him. I think he also had a little bit more flow. He was backing up a little bit on rush chances, which he had struggled with. So I don't think we saw the best version of Connor Hellebuyck go, because the goal he allowed short side, Thomas's goal. Thomas's goal, I get lost. The short side goal on the ice was brutal, like brutal. But then he flipped the script and made a huge save right after. So I don't think we've seen Hellebuyck's best yet, but I thought we've seen a better version of him, especially in the win in the last game.
Final one for you, Mike, before we talk a little bit about what's going on at Macadoodles. This game tonight, I want you to fill in the blank here. For the Blues to beat Winnipeg and force a Game 7, blank needs to happen.
You know what? I said this to somebody else. I think the bottom line is they got to stay out of the box. I really do. I think 5-on-5, the Blues are the team that's going to be more dangerous. And especially with Ehlers coming back in the lineup for Winnipeg, with Velarde back in the lineup as well, even missing Scheifele, you don't want to give Winnipeg those opportunities. And the strength of the Blues is the momentum that they gain by playing in your face, playing fast, quick on pucks, hard in the neutral zone. You're not going to do that when the game gets completely blown up by penalties. So they've got to be disciplined with their sticks. They can't be reaching into hands and feet. They've got to do their best to stay out of the box.
All right, Mike, before we let you go, obviously so much great stuff going on at Macadoodles. We're in spring season, which to me means golf season. What do you got going on out at Macadoodles these days?
Well, what's kind of cool is maybe people don't know this yet about us, but we've got a really nice cigar shop here at Macadoodles that we just built out even more. We're really proud of it. It's something that it's ancillary, but it's cool. And we got a lot in there. Again, we're bringing more in, especially being as close as we are out here in Dardenne Prairie to over to Winghaven and the Falls and other golf courses. So that's one thing we've built up. Our wine section's rolling. It's rosé now, man. We got rosé wines from France and California and all over that are really strong. And then upcoming tonight even, we've got an event with Old Forester. It's going to be amazing. We're going to run some Sugar Fire barbecue, bring Old Forester in advance of the Kentucky Derby happening. And then for Cinco de Mayo coming up on Monday, we're running some hot prices on tequila. We're going to have some tastings in the building as well. So plenty to like here at Macadoodles Dardenne Prairie at the corner of Bryan and Feisey Road, just north of the Page Extension, fellas.
Man, you need to get out there. I tell you all the time, we talk about it on Friday, but what an atmosphere, and it's the perfect place to stock up for all of your party needs thanks to Macadoodles. Mike, always appreciate catching up with you, man. Hopefully we're talking round 2 next Friday about this Blues team.
I sure hope so. We're going to be talking no matter what, but go Blues. We all want to see a win tonight, and I want to see my daughters come home happy. Let's go.
I love that. That's absolutely correct. He's Mike McKenna. And T-Bone, I loved what he said there because for me, that's probably how I would have filled in the blank. Keep this at even strength. If you look at how these series have gone, yes, the Blues have had a lot of success on the power play, but the games where Winnipeg has gained momentum and kind of outplayed you at even strength, the penalties have just gotten the Blues off of their rhythm. And if you can keep the rhythm on your side at 5-on-5, I agree with Mike. You have been the better team at even strength this series. You've got to find a way to keep it that way moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. They've got to stay out of the box, and I think you're spot on. I think all the penalties saw in the early going of that game, in game number 5, it felt like the game had no rhythm for most of the first period. And I think if you can stay out of the box, look, their PK's been good. The other one that I would throw in there, because this is kind of what I was thinking, I was almost on the opposite. I don't know if it's the opposite, but I was kind of in line with what Mike was thinking there. Mine was the Blues have got to draw penalties in this one. They've got to be driving. They didn't generate anything offensively, and they weren't creating enough opportunities on the rush when their defensemen were getting in. We talked about the defense providing some offense when they can get up in the rush, and what that does too is it's forced Winnipeg to take some penalties. And we've seen the Blues power play's been really good, and that's when, as he talked about Jordan Kyrou, that's where Kyrou's got his 2 goals so far in this series. So for me, though, yes, they do need to stay out of the box because you do not want, especially now that Winnipeg is starting to get some reinforcements back on the power play. To me, it was, hey, can the Blues force Winnipeg to the box and take advantage at 5-on-4? Because 5-on-5, this has been too close of a series.
Well, either way, keep them off the power play, and that's probably the better way to put it because with Ehlers back, yes, they don't have Scheifele, but now they've got 3 legit shot threats in Velarde, Connor, and Nikolai Ehlers on that number 1 power play unit. Speaking of Ehlers, he's coming back, so what does that mean for the Blues? Well, one line specifically has an opportunity to turn this series on its head. We'll discuss that and one thing the Blues need to avoid Winnipeg doing next year on BK and Ferrario.
delivers the puck. Perico to Fowler. Fowler trying to go to traffic to Perico. Shot, score! Jake Neighbors. A deflection in front. And with 22.7 seconds to play here in the first period, the Blues equalize it. We're 1-1. And it's time to switch from mimosas to Bud Light.
That was in game number 4. Jake Neighbors equalizing the score before the end of the first period, along with Tanner Hendrickson. And I'm Alex Ferrario. We've got Jordan Deacon back in our 101 ESPN studios. That line, Kyrou, Shen, and Neighbors, has 2 even strength goals so far in this series. They've got 4 total, but the other 2 have come from Jordan Kyrou on the power play. But what if I was to tell you that Neighbors, Shen, and Kyrou have been better in the postseason than McDavid, Draisaitl, and Perry? Or if I tell you they've been better than Gensel, Point, and Kucherov? Or, if you want to go even further than that, they've been the exact same line as McKenna, Necas, and Arturi Lehkonen. You'd probably think I was crazy, because the difference is the results versus what they're doing on the ice. And T-Bone, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you dove deeper into the weeds last night with this. If you go over to moneypuck.com, and I know expected goals, they get people upset on one hand, and on the other side, people get excited about it. The expected goals for per 60 minutes for Neighbors, Shen, and Kyrou is sitting at 4.55 so far in the postseason. There's only 9 other lines that have been better than the Blues. The difference, though, is the results that are coming away with it. But these guys are generating the scoring chances. Jim Montgomery told Curbs, we'll hear this on the Coaches Show later on tonight in the pregame, Jordan Kyrou leads this team in even strength scoring chances so far in the playoffs. Their second line has actually been really good. The difference has been they're just not finding the back of the net, but they're generating the offense.
Yeah, and they're going to need that line tonight, because that, to me, I was a little surprised when I looked at the numbers, especially because I have felt like Shen and Kyrou, more specifically, because Neighbors has got more 5-on-5 points, and we looked into this. It's kind of been on line changes, or he's gotten the puck to the point, and then the defensemen have scored, so it's led to some of his points. But to me, it had felt like, okay, just kind of the eye test, or looking at the numbers, Shen and Kyrou have been quiet. But then you take a look under the hood and you go, man, they are actually generating offense. It's just those guys themselves haven't been getting on the board, and more specifically Jordan Kyrou, because you're right. We heard that from Jim Montgomery. Look, he's got 17 scoring chances so far at 5-on-5. Like, and the next closest was 12. So Jordan Kyrou has been buzzing. They just need him to find a way to get one of those into the back of the net. And we've seen this before with Jordan Kyrou. He gets one, typically bunches come in a row for him. He goes on a hot stretch, and he hasn't been bad in this series. He's just not finding the back of the net at 5-on-5, and that is going to be something for the Blues tonight. We talked about it earlier. Can they take advantage of the matchup now that they are on home ice? Can they get Kyrou and Shen in that line in a favorable matchup, and hopefully see some of the results come forward tonight at 5-on-5, because they need their depth of scoring to come here tonight to avoid elimination.
This is why I'm not changing the lines. This is why we talked about the potential of doing it yesterday, and yes, Joseph looks like he's going in for Texier, but you're not changing the top 6, because the top 6 for you, Snuggerud, Thomas, Buchnevich, you've seen what that looks like when it works. Now, consistency has been probably the biggest thing that you have to kind of throw back at them, but when they've been on, Pavel Buchnevich has changed the outcome of a game. Snuggerud scored twice so far in the series, but you don't change it because that line is just about to break through. Now, ifs and buts don't really matter if they don't do it, and it might be the narrative we're talking about on Monday if this team loses, but you keep that line because if you're generating the offense, you've got to just get through. You get one through, and that's where you really start to build a little bit more confidence with this one. And you're right, T-Bone. To me, the difference in this series might be that second line, because now with Ehlers back, and Winnipeg, by the way, playing coy. They're talking in hypotheticals of if Ehlers is going to play and when he returns.
Boy, weird how he was, taking line rushes and on the power play of practice
I just wanted
today,
to see what it looks like. I love the coyness once we get into postseason. But now you've got top line versus top line, and that one is without their best weapon in Mark Scheifele. But they also get a weapon back for the second line that now becomes Perfetti, Ehlers, and Lowry. That can be a secondary scoring weapon. This is where you feel like you can combat that, but at some point you do have to find a way to come through rather than just get those scoring chances.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the Blues, it is about having 4 lines that really get rolling. And more importantly, it is, hey, yeah, the second and third line score for the St. Louis Blues.
Right.
The fourth line, though you don't mind the point production if they get it, they are more of the hem you in the zone and more about being on the forecheck, not necessarily putting up points on the board. But that's what it's going to come down to. I think tonight is especially one of those games where it really comes down to depth of scoring. You know, I think you have to look at your second and third line and say, look, we've got to get just a little bit more. Not a ton more, but just a little bit more from those lines here at 5-on-5, because that's been the two lines that just haven't been putting up the points on the board. The second line and then the third line, especially for the St. Louis Blues. And meanwhile, with the Winnipeg Jets, though they are getting some reinforcements back, they're without Scheifele. You know, I found it interesting. Scott O'Neill said yesterday what the kind of key to the game for them was. And he said, quote, this is going to be meat and potato, work zone to zone, get out of our zone, get through that neutral zone, and then make them spend some time in their end of the rink. So this is straightforward. Grind it out, kind of work for, fight for every inch, and get those greasy goals. They're trying to do what the Blues did so well in the previous 2 games here at home, which is get in on the forecheck, be able to roll your 4 lines, and not just have to rely on one line to really carry the load for you in tonight's game.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's what these comes down to. Now, they have not turned out that way. That's been the wild part, which goes to show you the goaltending. I've thought every one of these games was going to be tight 1-goal games into the third period, and I think only one of them has been a 1-goal game going into the third period, or 2 of them have been, but the tightness has not been there, and that's just been because of the explosion of offense. And to me, whether you want to get into that third line, if it's Bolduc and Sundqvist, because we'll talk Bolduc in the 1 o'clock hour, you do need to see a little bit more offense on that side of things. But, man, if one of Jordan Kyrou or Jake Neighbors can break through, now you've got that depth of scoring that can cause problems with Winnipeg, because Winnipeg's focus has been, cool, how do we shut down the Robert Thomas line? And when they've exploded, Winnipeg has either been unable to stop the Thomas line, Puchnevic's hat trick, or we've seen Jake Neighbors score, we've seen Oscar Sundqvist score, we've seen the WTF line score. There's got to be something in the middle, and that's what Winnipeg did in Game 5, where you saw Niederreiter score with the deflection in front of the net. You saw Nemesnikov score when he got that promotion. That's been at least the difference that have tilted this series. It's been that middle 6 lines that have scored.
And I'll be curious to see if tonight, I mean, you mentioned kind of what they did in Game 3, the Buchnevich hat trick. I'll be curious if tonight the Blues decide to whether, if they go with that Buch line again, or remember, they started off Game 3 with the Schenn line on the top line. But now the reason I bring that up is because you don't have Scheifele, do the Blues see if maybe because there's going to be some of that chemistry that they're trying to work throughout that game, because they haven't played, we mentioned this earlier, they've played like 9 minutes. I think they played 9 minutes in the regular season without Scheifele on that line. I wonder if the Blues will throw the second line at them and say, okay, let's see how good this chemistry is. Can you really stop what's been our best 5-on-5 line? And then maybe that's where tonight you see that breakout come through for the second line. Or do they decide, hey, you know what? We really like what we've seen from our first line, especially here on home ice. Do you decide to throw them out there? I'll be curious to see what Jim Montgomery decides to do going up against that top line now that Scheifele is out.
My guess is you keep the Thomas line against that Connor and Velarde line, because you hope that the lack of centerman can open up some opportunities to exploit Winnipeg with Thomas, Buchnevich, and Snuggerud. Like, not taking anything away from Velarde or Connor, but Scheifele's the guy that eliminates the best playmaker on the ice in Robert Thomas. And you put Schenn's line out there against the Ehlers line, because it's big on big, Lowry versus Schenn, but you also put the physicality on a guy like Nikolai Ehlers if he's just playing to see how he's feeling, just like they tried to do against Velarde in game number 5. And then that comes down to, what does your third and fourth line do? Because we've seen Winnipeg's fourth line score a couple of goals. Can Bolduc break through? We'll talk a little bit about Bolduc and that third line coming up in the 1 o'clock hour. Coming up next, though, yesterday's game for the Cardinals, where they got beat 9-1 by Cincinnati. It's kind of been the story of the Cardinals this season. We'll get into that next here on BK and Ferrario on 1. Jordan Deacon mentioned it on her SportsCenter update. The Cardinals fall to the Reds last night 9-1, but they do split that series with Cincinnati. And overall, pretty successful. When you win versus the Brewers, you split versus the Reds. We talked about it yesterday, T-Bone. You know, you're in the upper half of that tier list that we talked about with those two teams in the NL Central. But once again, we've seen part of the reason why the Cardinals have had a sub-500 record all year. And it's been because of that middle portion of the bullpen. You had Swanson come in because of that rain delay, which kind of sucked for the Cardinals because Matthew Liberatore was on the mound pitching well, but Swanson gets lit up, Riley O'Brien gets lit up, John King gets lit up. With the exception of Maton, Helsley, and Kyle Leahy, the middle of this bullpen has been susceptible to games getting out of hand, and that's really why we're talking about a team that's 4 games below 500 and not talking about a team that could be potentially 2 or 3 games above 500.
Yeah, I mean, when you saw that game yesterday go into that rain delay, and if you had an idea of, okay, this is going to be a while, which ended up, I think it was like an hour and a half rain delay, you knew Libby wasn't coming back into that game, and then I think we both felt the same way, right? Like, oh boy, now you got to go to the underbelly of your bullpen because you're only in the 4th inning. You're not going to throw out Maton and Helsley and Leahy at that point. It was a matter of, okay, can the bullpen keep it close? And the answer was no. Once again, you've got Swanson who gives up the runs, as you mentioned. O'Brien doesn't do well. John King gives up a couple of runs as well. It's the underbelly of this bullpen that remains a huge problem for the Cardinals. And to their credit, they're trying to churn through. And look, I'm not saying they send down O'Brien or send down Swanson just yet. I think they are going to send down Swanson probably just to get a fresh arm for today and for the start of this Mets series, which does make sense to an extent. I like the fact that they're trying to churn through, see if they can find somebody to work, because listen to these numbers. I went back and looked at this last night because I was curious. You know, right now this bullpen gives me a little bit of vibes to what was the 2019 team, 2021 team that went on that big winning streak. Because remember, early on in the season, they only had Gallegos, Cabrera, and Alex Reyes, who they could trust at the back end of the bullpen. And then the underbelly was bad, and they ended up finding Luis Garcia, and they ended up finding T.J. McFarland to get 5 guys that they could trust. But for the Cardinals so far this year, Helsley, Leahy, Maton have covered 42 innings. They've got 43 strikeouts so far, and they've held opponents to a 160 batting average against and have a 2.36 ERA.
Wow.
So they've got really good numbers. When you get to your big 3, outside a couple of blow-ups, one from Helsley, one from Leahy, the bullpen, the big 3 have been very good for you. And then there's the rest of the bullpen, where the rest of the bullpen so far this season has covered 69 1/3 innings pitched, has 50 strikeouts. Opponents are hitting 270 against them, and they have a 6.1 ERA. Right there's the storyline for the St. Louis Cardinals, and it's what we've been talking about for them this season. When they have to go to the underbelly of their pen, whether that is to try and bridge to get to a high leverage arm because maybe a starter doesn't eat innings, or you get caught in a situation like it was yesterday, which was, hey, unfortunate rain delay comes in, we've got to go to these guys. Hopefully they can keep this game close, and they don't. That has been the biggest storyline for the Cardinals, and I think the biggest part of this too is just the strikeout stuff. They don't have guys that have got strikeout stuff. Now, they've added Riley O'Brien. I thought Swanson's stuff has looked good when he's been up here. They're trying to churn through and get some guys that have got better swing and miss stuff. But the rest of the bullpen has 50 strikeouts. That's barely more than the 3 good guys at the back end of the pen in Helsley, Leahy, and Maton. They've got to find some guys that can miss bats, get some strikeouts, and can stabilize. If they can find just 1, maybe 2 guys, and look, I think they're starting to believe. We'll see. I think there's only been a 2-game sample size of this so far. The Cardinals seem to think they have found something with JoJo again. Yeah. We'll see how he looks in this series against the Mets, because you're going to see Juan Soto, Brandon Nimmo. They've got some pretty good lefties in that lineup. If they can find just 1 lefty to help them out, stabilize this bullpen, and they can get 1 more right-handed arm to really help them in the underbelly of this pen, they should be a decent baseball team, because the starting pitching's been good, the offense has been good, and you're right, they probably are not a 4 games below 500 team. They are probably sitting right around 500, if not above 500, if it weren't for their bullpen. Which is the second best team in the NL Central right now, which is a good thing. And I agree with kind of what BT told us earlier today, which if you missed it, you can go back and check it out on our podcast, 101ESPN.com, which is presented by Schaefer Door Company. But you know, they've had to use a lot of arms because of the rain delays and for how many games that they've played with no days off. They've gone to that 6-man rotation. I think when things settle down a little bit more, Steven Matz can become one of those bridge guys to get to the deep portion of your bullpen, and frankly, could potentially be a high-leverage lefty for you to where you're not using JoJo Romero, and then Gordon Graceffo could be that right-handed weapon for you. So
this is the bullpen. You and I have talked a lot about this, BK as well. Like, bullpens are so fickle. They go up and down, and you can replace them in one season. But it does feel like if it's important to figure out your back end, if you've got 3 dudes that you can rely on, then you hopefully can figure out the middle of it. I do feel like they have some guys, though, that fall into that, and Steven Matz and Gordon Graceffo. It's just a matter of keeping them in their roles and not having to use them other ways.
Yeah, I kind of wish, and look, I understand why they're not doing it because he has been good as a starter for them so far. I kind of wish they've already moved Matz to that role.
Yeah.
And you're right, when they finally get to a spot where they can potentially say, okay, you know what, now we're into the later stages of the season. We don't need 6 starters. Matz can become that guy if JoJo's doesn't find his pitch, his changeup really again. I do like that idea because I've brought up the idea of I'd like to see them make him that left-handed high leverage arm right now, and then when they do need this 6th starter, they kind of, whether it be Gordon Graceffo, who looked great coming out in relief, or you use Michael McGreevy in that spot, right? Yeah. And you're going to use this as a spot start, kind of do what you did with Tyler Lyons when they had him in the 2015, I think is when he was with a Cardinal, where, okay, we need a spot start for that day. Boom, we've got the guy, it's Tyler Lyons. And then you can bring him up, send him back down. You use that as kind of that 6th starter. You then now have Steven Matz who can slide into the bullpen, who's been good and be the high leverage arm. I'm with you, though. I think by the time we get into, I would say, June, I think odds are we're going to be talking about Steven Matz as their best high leverage left-handed bullpen arm.
I generally am asking this because I'm curious from Cardinals fans listening. So text us 314-399-9646 over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Our studio cams brought to you by Air Alliance Team. Do you feel better about the Cardinals that they just kept their head above water and were able to hold their own against the NL Central teams? You take 2 of 3 against Milwaukee, and with the exception of the rain delay, I kind of believe that the Cardinals were going to take 3 of 4 against Cincinnati because Liberatore was going to be able to give you depth. Cincinnati had to go into their bullpen deep after game 3 of that series. So Cincinnati looked like they were kind of in the struggle bus scenario. But regardless, you split with Cincinnati. You beat Milwaukee, 2 teams that have kind of had your number over these last couple of years. Does it make you feel any better about this season?
I feel like the season's not over.
Because it was last time you played them last year.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it going into that Brewers series where the Brewers kind of shoved you around and said, hey, we are the big brother now. And I think they won the first 6 of 7 against the Cardinals about this time last year.
You played against them.
So I don't know if I feel better and I'm like saying, hey, the Cardinals, they're still in this, right? They might be a playoff team. I still feel like they are better than what their record shows, and I think that is because of the bullpen, as we've been talking about. But I am kind of glad to say, okay, you kind of held serve right now with the 2 teams that I thought they were equal to coming into the season, and the Brewers and the Reds. It would have been nice to get 3 or 4 from Cincinnati. I think this is a series that will be telling of, okay, are they starting to build momentum? Because the Mets are very good, as BT told us, and they just kicked the crap out of you when you went to New York and swept you for 4 games.
Yeah.
Can you find a way to take 2 or 3 from the Mets? If you do, now you can look at it. They'll still be below 500 and go, okay, maybe this team is maybe starting to turn a corner now that we have exited the first month of the season. Because I think if I would have said, we talked about this a lot on the show before the season started, hey, what do you think the Cardinals are going to be in that first month? And I think you were kind of one of those that was, I think maybe they're kind of what they had been, right? Like a 10-win, 11-win team, 5+ games below 500. Yeah. And they're almost kind of in that spot, but they are still hanging around a little bit. And it's not like the NL Central is going to run away from you.
Yeah, well, and then we got a couple of these texts on our Air Comfort Service text line. No, because none of those teams are as good as the Cubs are. You're right, but, I mean, yes, the Cubs are better than you, but it's significant, in my opinion, to be better than the 2 teams that are in that second tier, especially when we feel like this was supposed to be a down season. But to the sentiment of that they haven't beaten anybody good, I mean, you took 2 of 3 against the Phillies. You took 2 of 3 against the Houston Astros. You were swept by the Mets. You were swept by the Red Sox. And, I mean, yes, the Braves took 2 of 3 against you, but one was a 1-run game, and the other one got out of hand in the end portion of that series. It's not like you're getting beat by – it's not like you're beating bad teams and getting beat by good teams. You're kind of right there with those good teams, which, again, I'm putting it into the perspective of this was supposed to be a down season. You shouldn't be doing that, which is important, at least for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think though they are probably not a playoff team, it is encouraging to see them kind of separating a little bit in that second tier. And look, I agree with the text. The Cubs are the better team, and we'll see what they look like when they go up against the Cubs for the first time. But they've been competitive. I mean, you mentioned the Phillies. You look at the series against the Mets; they were in most of those games. It was Ryan Fernandez happened to be in the bullpen for that series.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they look like. Again, it is more about the individuals, more about
Big
the
picture.
younger players, bigger picture for the St. Louis Cardinals. But we talked about this a little bit yesterday. They were getting a lot of positive returns on some of the young guys. It's just not coming together as a team, and that is because of their bullpen. Will this eventually be what the Blues were, which was they were getting a lot of positive answers, and then it finally resulted in the team winning a bunch of hockey games, and why we're sitting at Enterprise Center today being a playoff team. I don't know if the Cardinals will get to the playoffs, but will they start to go on a little bit of a run and make things a little bit more interesting?
I think it's important to add that because I feel like it's falling underneath the cracks of people thinking that I'm saying this should be a playoff team. No, this team was supposed to be 100 losses. That's what we thought for how bad they were going to be, and it's important to keep it into perspective because you're right. Nobody expected the Blues to be the playoffs with the exception of a couple of people in the front office, but you're sitting here. And that was a bonus. Even if they missed the playoffs at the end of the season, you got answers. And that's where the perspective is right now. And I do feel like you're getting answers. And to the point of what the beginning of this segment was, the problem for you in these games so far this season has been how bad your bullpen has been. And that's something that you can fix in a matter of a couple of seasons. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in about 15, we'll get back into the Blues. Does Zach Bolduc need to provide a little bit more offense for the Blues to win this series? That and some really interesting numbers on Jimmy Snuggerud. But coming up next, we dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Along with Tanner Hendrickson, Jordan Deacon back in our 101 ESPN studios. I'm Alex Ferrario, where we are here at Enterprise Center for Game 6 tonight between the Blues and Jets. Our First Community Credit Union pregame starting at 6 o'clock. Curbs and Joey with puck drop at 7. Fastlane will be here from 2 to 6. Before we get back into the Blues on the other side, T-Bone, what do you got for us today on the junk drawer?
Well, there are things that I don't understand how they become a trend, and this is another one of them that has become a trend, and it's not like a TikTok challenge. It is just a simple question that has since kind of taken the internet ablaze. You know what I'm getting ready to ask you?
I know what you're going to do, and this is so dumb to me.
The 100 men versus a gorilla.
What are we doing?
Has taken off as a big question that became, I think it took off again on Reddit, and now I've seen multiple people talking about it. One of my favorite YouTubers that I watch is talking about it. I can't believe it's a conversation, so I'll just ask you the question, but we might as well answer it. We got to keep up, stay high.
Got to stay hot.
We got to stay hip with the kids, you know. So, who would win?
A gorilla. Stop it.
A gorilla versus 100?
Yes. Stop it. What are we doing? Like, why are we acting as if 100? Can 100 men take down a gorilla? Who cares? First of all. Second of all, are 100 men fighting with fists? Then you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose.
But there's 100 of them.
I don't care.
Oh, I don't know. I think I would side with 100 men.
I think I would wonder why people were stupid enough to try and attack one gorilla with 100 men.
I have to join in here. I've seen this as well, and I think it's just uneducated people making these types of presumptions, because I've also seen, would you rather face a gorilla, a lion, a hippo, and somebody was like, what is a hippo going to do to me on land? A lot. So I think it's just on education, and obviously the gorilla would win.
It absolutely is on education, Jordan. Like, the hippo thing is wild to me. This is going to be like Animal Planet Ferrario here, which I hope I'm correct. I believe a hippo's jaw is the strongest of any animal. And, like, people are like, oh, we could take down a hippo. No, you can't.
I could outrun a hippo.
No, I don't think you can.
Really? I don't think you can.
I think hippos are very fast.
I don't think I could outswim a hippo.
It's like people thinking, it's like, oh, yeah, 100 men can be as strong as a gorilla. No, the gorilla's stronger.
I'm with the 5'7", the 100 men for sure.
You know what?
I think
Try it. Try it.
No, I'm not going to be
I hope there's a hope. I hope there's a group of 100 people that are thinking, let's do it.
I am not going to be a part of the 100 men. I would drag us down. So I will be the one that watches the 100 men versus a gorilla. I just love how it's the simple things in life that have become what trends in America, right? Like this question suddenly taking over.
And then I've seen people be like, well, maybe if it's not 100, what about 1,000? Maybe 10,000. Dude, just stop.
We only need 100. I think
maybe I just lack fun.
I think you lack fun, right? Like you don't understand what
these aren't even shower thoughts, though. These aren't even like,
this is
wonder.
Definitely a shower.
No, it's not even. I wonder. Yes, you would lose to the gorilla.
Now, see, you're bringing down the vibe, right? Like,
not bringing down the
this
vibe.
This is a question that should be answered. It is one that we need answered.
Do they have tranquilizers? Because then it's a different. This is just fist
man
on fist.
versus gorilla.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think gorilla always wins.
I mean, clearly, if it was 100 versus 100, as we've seen with Planet of the Apes, the monkeys win. But 100 versus
I think
1.
Planet of the Apes was like 100 versus like 4, and they still won. So,
yeah.
Planet of the Apes, man. That tells you everything you need to know.
I'm just trying to.
I appreciate. You know what? I appreciate you, but this feels a lot like
get me caught up on like 90s music and hip hop.
This feels a lot like the trend of the Tide Pods, where it was like, "Hey, you'll die."
Was really dumb.
Just like you'll die with trying to fight a gorilla.
It's just a good, fun question, a good shower thought that must be answered. So, like when you lay down tonight, and, we've talked about this before. After doing Blues game, you get kind of amped up, right? You have a tough time shutting down. You just lay down in bed and you think, instead of counting sheep, think in your mind, okay, who would win, 100 men or a gorilla? And then you will fall asleep nice and easily.
The thought will leave my mind, and then I have to come up with something else to push myself asleep. But regardless, people will continue to talk. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. T-Bone thinks he could take down a gorilla. We'll get to that probably another day when BK comes back. But the Blues need Zach Bolduc to help take down the Winnipeg Jets. His offense has been there in the regular season. Can it show up in the postseason? We'll get to that next here on 101 ESPN.
BluesTalkRadio.com.
Pretty much broken down this series every way you can, looking at the matchups, looking at the mismatches, and where the offense should come from. But one guy that has kind of flown under the radar in this series has been Zach Bolduc. And along with Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario as the Blues get set for Game 6 this evening. You know, we talked a lot earlier, T-Bone, about the second line of Neighbors and Shen and Kyrou, of how they're generating offense and how right now it just feels like they need to break one through. Thomas line, of course, has been great. The WTF line has been a mainstay for Jim Montgomery really all season long. The line, though, that has disappeared for the Blues has been Bolduc, Sundqvist, and Joseph Texier. Now, Sundqvist has been consistent in this series, and of course you've had a revolving door of Joseph in 11-7, and then you've had Texier for a couple of games. Zach Bolduc has 1 point so far in this playoff series, and that point came on the power play, it was an even strength point that came earlier in the series. If I remember correctly, it was the game number 1 that Bolduc picked up that assist. Yeah, it was a power play assist because he got it on Kyrou's goal. So you haven't had the even strength offense from Zach Bolduc, but you also haven't had the shots from Zach Bolduc. In the series thus far, he has 5 shots on goal, and 3 of those 5 came in one game, and that was game number 2 when the Blues lost 2-1. For me, we've talked so much about the depth of scoring, for how effective Zach Bolduc and really that third line was down the stretch. That's an element that's missing that the Blues need a little bit more offense from.
Yeah, you'd like to see Zach Bolduc get going, and we've talked about this. You know, I think it's him trying to learn the playoff style of hockey. But you look at like what their Corsi percentage is for the Blues when Zach Bolduc is on the ice, and right now it's 53%. So it shows you that when he is on the ice, that the Blues are getting some decent offensive zone time right now.
Yeah.
The problem is he just feels like he's been quiet. I feel like he's been good on the forecheck. He's not finding the space to get his shot off, and he's got a very good shot, as we've seen throughout the season. So whether it be it's 5-on-5 tonight and he provides that depth of scoring, or it's when they get a power play opportunity, can he find enough space in the center of the ice that he got so good at after the Four Nations break, where he went on that tear and ended up becoming a legitimate goal scorer for the St. Louis Blues on the power play? He became the shot they were looking for, just not in the traditional sense when we think about it. We always think about kind of more on those bumpers out wide. He was doing it by in the center of the ice in that high-danger slot area. Can he do that tonight? Whether that's at 5-on-5, can he provide offense, or can it be on 5-on-4? Can he be the guy that becomes a difference maker and provides that shot for them? Because they need him to start producing a little bit here if they're going to even up this series and if they're going to force this one to a Game 7.
Yeah, you know, I think the narrative on Bolduc is he's just a power play goal scorer, and you really don't have the even strength goals. In the final 26 games of the regular season from Four Nations break on, he had 13 goals. 7 of them were at even strength, and 6 of them were on the power play. And here's the one for me, T-Bone. It was the offense that he was providing in terms of the shots. Maybe he wasn't scoring, but he was still picking up points. He was finding ways to generate more offense. He had 57 shots on goal in his final 26 games. So He's typically a guy that's putting 3 or 4 shots on goal per game, and that's just what you haven't seen. I don't put all of this on Zach Bolduc, though, because when I've seen these lines play, they're in the zone. Yeah. They're cycling the puck. What they're not doing is they're not getting shots on goal. And sometimes for me, that tells me the line chemistry is off. You just don't have that third option that's able to continue the options and cycle the puck. And that's why I'm really curious of what Matthew Joseph looks like tonight, because they had it for one game with Texier, but from the Four Nations break till the end of the season, it was all Joseph, Sundqvist, and Bolduc. That's where the even strength offense was coming from.
Yeah, and to your point on kind of that chemistry, what has been kind of the reason why you see Joseph and Texier kind of continuing this rotating door of coming in and out of the lineup?
Yeah.
It's because they don't know where they're going, right? And I don't mean the players don't know what they're doing. It's the coaching staff doesn't trust that, hey, they're going to be in the right spots. They're going to help that third line offensively, and that could be what's been affecting them. You're right. It could just be the chemistry, and that's why they're not getting those shot attempts on goal. That is the part that I'll be curious to see tonight. Can that third line really pepper the goaltender? And look, the text line, we've gotten some text saying, well, what about Jordan Kyrou? It's both Kyrou and Bolduc. Yeah. Those are the two wingers the Blues need to get going to provide some 5-on-5 offense, because right now you've only got 1 point from those two 0 points, at 5-on-5. And those are some of the guys that we thought were going to be maybe not the main piece that had to have success in this series for the Blues to advance, but they definitely had to have them be kind of complementary pieces to help them out at 5-on-5.
Yeah, well, and another guy, too. And by the way, somebody texted in asking, guys, what line has Bolduc played on when he was scoring in the regular season? That was the line. It was Joseph, Sundqvist, and Bolduc. Now, Bolduc flipped a couple of times, played with Thomas and Buchnevich. I know he played with Schenn a little bit once the Holloway injury took place. But from where it started out of the Four Nations break up until Dylan Holloway's injury, Bolduc was out there with Braden Schenn, or with Oscar Sundqvist and Matthew Joseph. You know, another guy, too, T-Bone, that has had a really good playoff series that I don't know is being talked enough about, and this might not just be for the playoffs, this is more big picture, is Jimmy Snuggerud. You know, we came out of the Four Nations break talking about Snuggerud potentially joining the Blues after college, and when he joined, the question was, is he going to get in the lineup? Does he sit because you can't break up the line combinations? The moment he has stepped in, all the way up now through 5 playoff games, Jimmy Snuggerud has not looked outmatched. And on top of that, he is tied for third in most points in the playoffs by a rookie, and 2 of the 3 that are in front of him, they've been eliminated from the playoffs. Tampa's Gage Goncaves and Montreal's Lane Hudson. But if you go off of offense, if you go off of goals, he's tied with the most goals amongst rookies with Logan Stankoven from the Carolina Hurricanes. Jimmy Snuggerud is just another reminder of, regardless of what happens in this series, man, does the future look bright. We entered this season not knowing anything about Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg, Jimmy Snuggerud,
Zach Bolduc.
Zach Bolduc, yeah, because we kind of thought Zach Bolduc was just going to be a secondary weapon for him.
I thought he was trade bait in the offseason.
Probably.
Now I don't think that.
3 of those 4, which I can hear the argument on Zach Bolduc, 3 of those 4 have emerged as potential stars for this Blues team. Now, that might be too aggressive for some, but watching the impact of Dylan Holloway this season, Jimmy Snuggerud now with more goals than what Matthew Nyes scored in his first season coming out of college with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Nyes, by the way, scored 29 goals in the regular season and was massive in their first-round win against the Ottawa Senators. And then Broberg, I tweeted this out a little bit ago. Philip Broberg has not been on the ice in this series for an even strength goal against. It is wild to say that there are 3 guys that weren't on this team before the start of this season that now potentially could be stars for the Blues.
Yeah, and just thinking about what Jimmy Snuggerud will be when he gets another season completely under his belt and gets an off-season of training, I mean, he looks like he's going to be potentially a star with the St. Louis Blues. I mean, you mentioned, to me, he does not look outmatched in this series. And the reason I brought up the offseason, the one thing where he does look outmatched is just the physicality, right? You can tell he's getting shoved around a little bit. But for the most part, he has got great hockey IQ from what I have seen, to where he knows, hey, I'm not going to be able to win these big board battles. So what's he do? He makes sure he gives up the puck to a teammate before he gets pinched against the boards. And that's what you're really seeing, is he's playing with hockey IQ. He broke up a play in the game, in Game 5 defensively, where he came across the ice, got a stick in a lane, and though he didn't technically block the shot, he slowed down the pace of the shot, and it was an easier save for Jordan Binnington when he was sliding over to his right. He's not only producing offensively to what you mentioned, where he's got the points here in the playoffs, where he's one of the best rookies so far, but he's also playing smart offensively. I wondered if he was going to be exposed in this playoff series against the Winnipeg Jets, especially on their home ice.
Oh, yeah.
And he hasn't been. Now, they broke up that line a little bit in the last game. That was more for their lack of offense than it was for their defense. He's been very impressive in this series. He has fit on this Blues team like a glove, and it's been impressive to see, and it really makes you wonder what the future is going to look like for him, because as he gets bigger and stronger, it's not only going to improve the shot, it's going to improve his physicality on the boards, on the forecheck, and he's still got the defensive smarts. He is going to be, I think, a legitimate piece for this team moving forward.
And you could see his confidence growing in this series. First game, 2 shot attempts, 1 on goal. Second game, 7 shot attempts, 2 on goal. 2 shot attempts, no shots on goal. That was the 7-2 win. And then the last 2 games, he has had 10 shot attempts and 4 shots on goal. Yeah. You've got the offense, you've got the shots, but you're also playing 16, 17, 18 minutes a night. And for a guy who is 20 years old, and again, I reference Matthew Nyes. It's why I thought Snuggerud would stay in the lineup when he came out of college. You know, Matthew Nyes, that first season with the Maple Leafs, got 1 goal in the first round of that season he came out of college, and then they got bounced in the first round. The next season, he scores 15 goals. This season, he scored 29 goals in the regular season. In the playoff series against Ottawa, he scored 4, and now they're labeling him as a new member of the core 4 for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's 22 years old. Jimmy Snuggerud is 20. By the time he could be the same age as Matthew Nyes, you could be talking about a potential 30-goal scorer. And I actually think Nyes doesn't have the full tool set that Snuggerud does. Nyes is a power forward. Snuggerud's a guy that can shoot. We've seen him create plays offensively with his passing, but he's also very good defensively. We've seen him pick up plays in the neutral zone. It's why it's so fascinating what this playoff series can do for the next 5, 6, 7 years with all of these guys in the same age bracket and the confidence that they're gaining from just one playoff series.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned this before he got here. I mean, that Snuggerud shot, man, that is his best goal on that thing.
And I don't even think we've seen it as effective as it can be.
100%. I mean, you think back to his goal that he scored. I mean, he just picked a spot, and he's able to beat Connor Hellebuyck, who's probably going to win the Vezina and potentially the MVP this season. Think of that. This isn't like he's beating, a goalie that's kind of in the middle tier in the NHL. He's being the best of the best. Now, look, I know Hellebuyck has his struggles in the playoffs, but he's picking corners on him. He nearly beat him in the last game. You mentioned his shot attempts in the last game. He had a shot, I think it was near the end of the second period. It was either near the end of the first or the end of the second period, and he did not miss by much. I think he had Hellebuyck beat. He just fired it wide. I love what we have seen from Jimmy Snuggerud. And though we've been talking about the young guys, I'm still high on Zach Bolduc, even though he's had a bad playoff series, and I don't even know if bad.
I'd say silent. He's at a quiet playoff series.
He's been quiet from a points production standpoint. He still has shown that he kind of fits into Blues playoff hockey, what they want to be moving forward.
Hey, you can join tonight's watch party and watch tonight's Game 6 if you can't be in attendance with Anthony Stalter. You could join him and the 101 ESPN Street Team Friday tonight for a Game 6 watch party over at Cafe Telegraph. You can grab drinks, delicious food, and enjoy the Blues game on all of their big screens. Also, get registered to win 101 ESPN giveaways while out there. This Friday tonight over at Cafe Telegraph, 2650 Telegraph Road in South County. Learn more about our Game 6 Blues watch party with Anthony Stalter over at 101ESPN.com. We'll get back into the Blues in about 15 minutes talking about their top 4 defensemen being the difference makers in this one tonight. We've had a lot of difference makers, but it feels like what this series truly is going to be. But coming up next, we want to hear from you. You can text us on our Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Also on our YouTube chat at 101ESPN STL, our graveyard chat. What's been your biggest takeaway in the first month of the Cardinals season? That's next here on So yesterday was officially the end of the first month of the season for the Cardinals. Really, it was that doubleheader that played in the rain, but yesterday, of course, was the first one in May. The regular season is going on for the Cardinals. They're 4 games below 500. Before yesterday, there were 3 games below 500 at the onset of the beginning of May. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. What's been your biggest takeaway in the first month of the season for the Cardinals, T-Bone? Because I'll start this one. I said it on opening day when we were at Ballpark Village, and we said at the end of April what the Cardinals' record would be, and I said they'd be 10 games below 500. They're not that. And to me, my biggest takeaway has been how effective the offense has been. Because the main point for me was how bad their offense was going to look. I didn't trust certain guys. I thought Victor Scott was going to struggle. I thought you'd see a little bit of a setback for Mason Wynn. I did not think Nolan Arenado was going to be effective for you. And I was wrong on a lot of these fronts. Their offense has been the biggest bright spot for the Cardinals. And I know people earlier when we were talking about this Cardinals saying, like, look, they're not even that good in the NL Central, which is a bad division in baseball. I get it. But perspective-wise, you're getting answers. And that's my takeaway right now. I'm starting to believe that there are players in this Cardinals system that can be impactful players for this team's future. Does that mean they have a star in the organization? I don't think so. Maybe Ivan Herrera is it, but I think they're at the end of this year still going to be searching for a middle-of-the-order bat. But what I can say is they have answers in a lot of areas that last season, 2 seasons ago, I felt like we were still asking the same question. Do they have a leadoff hitter? Do they have 2 outfielders that can play? Do they have a middle-of-the-order bat?
Yeah, and real quick on that, like it feels surprising to say that, right? And this was a question I asked on the Redbird Report on, I think it was the first episode BK and I did. And I asked the question of, can this season be a success if Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman don't end up reaching their stride this year, or even kind of stabilizing, as I would call it, just getting back to being league average. And so far, they haven't done that. You know, we talked about Jordan Walker yesterday. What do you make of his early season struggles? And it's a little bit alarming that he's continuing to chase after that slider low and away. But to your point, like, the offense still feels like there's a lot of positives to take away from it. And the 2 biggest building blocks to the team haven't been hitting yet so far. So I agree with you. The offense has been impressive, and I don't know if they're going to leave this season thinking, okay, we've got a guy that's a star internally. That's something they're probably going to have to find externally going into the offseason or in a couple off seasons from now. I would say the biggest surprise for me so far this year has been, and I'm just going to focus this in on one player because I thought there was no way this was going to work, and that would be Matthew Liberatore as a starter.
That's a really good one.
I really did not expect that this was going to go. I thought this was going to be, hey, we're going to give him some runway, and then they were going to have a serious conversation at about this point of, okay, what do we do with Matthew Liberatore? Do we put him back in the bullpen? And if Matz was healthy, bring him back into the rotation. He didn't get righties out last year. He's had trouble getting righties out throughout his career. And he's been arguably their best starting pitcher so far this season. And I know his outing got cut short yesterday because of the rain, but you look at what he's done. 34 innings pitched so far this year. He has got a 3.44 ERA. His FIP is at 2.3. He's done a good job. Early on in the season, he had problems with one big blow-up inning. He's done a better job of really being able to limit the damage so far this year. And how about this? This is what I find interesting. Look, WAR, what is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
He's top 15 in WAR among Major League starters so far this year at 1.1. He's ahead of this guy. You might have heard of him.
Who?
Paul Skeens in Pittsburgh so far. So
we have Paul Skeens?
No, we don't have Paul Skeens. You know, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Skeens will finish with a higher WAR than Matthew Liberatore.
We'll see.
But that is such a massive development for the St. Louis Cardinals, having a young starter that they can have developed internally. Then this also goes to Palante. Palante's been good. He hasn't been as good as he was in the second half of last year, but they have found 2 young arms that are cost control that they can plan to put into their rotation as of right now, going into next season and a couple seasons beyond that as well.
So it seems like an odd question to ask because obviously it's the biggest question that teams need, but what would it do if you exited this season and the only void you're trying to fill is a 3-hole hitter or a 4-hole hitter, however you want to, a middle-of-the-order bat for the Cardinals? And the reason I ask that is because the last couple of years, I feel like we were asking multiple questions. You know, do they have two guys that can be impact hitters in the middle of the order because Arenado and Goldschmidt hadn't been working for you? Who's their leadoff hitter because Newpar couldn't stay healthy and Donovan was good, but he also was in and out of the lineup. Pitching-wise, they just don't have depth of pitching, and are they going to have to spend tons of money via free agency? It feels like when we're having these conversations, and again, this is 1 month into the season, things can change in a snap of the fingers, but to me that feels like you're trending successfully in the right direction. If you exit a season and say, we figured this out, that out, all we need to do is wonder how we're going to get that middle of the order bat. And again, good luck. It's what every team is asking for, but can you have the upper hand in all of the other conversations?
Yeah, because it is one of those where it is, hey, we potentially are looking for a number 3 hole hitter, and it's still super early to find out what these guys are, because we know in our luck we'll be talking in a month about, man, Liberatore's in the bullpen again because he got rocked after 3 starts.
And their leadoff hitter's struggling.
Newpar's injured, and Donovan's no longer hitting, but hopefully, knock on wood, those things don't happen. I just don't know how – I don't know how the Cardinals are going to approach this upcoming offseason.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to expect from Chaim Bloom. He was kind of known as being caught in between in his time with Boston. And is ownership going to be willing to go out there and spend? The answer to that so far in the Mo era was no.
And that's the crazy part, because when you look at the Chicago Cubs, and I understand they're considered different markets for how big Chicago is, but they were a team, much like the Cardinals last year, that it was like, this team's not going anywhere. And one signing changed the trajectory for that team.
Now we'll see if they
trade,
can.
I should say, with
if
Tucker.
they can re-sign Tucker, they will be using essentially the old Cardinals model, which was, hey, we're going to develop more of the complementary pieces. They end up go out and signing a couple guys as well, like say a Suzuki was a signing that they made. Ian Happ was developed internally by them, and I wouldn't call him a star, so that's why I would kind of throw him in the conversation as a really good complementary piece, or at least one of the bats that you need. And then you look at their rotation; most of those guys that they did have, or one that they did develop, was Justin Steele. Of course, he's now done for the season. They went out and signed Shota Imanaga. They went out and signed Jamison Taillon. But what they did do was they said, hey, we haven't developed that star internally. Ian Happ's been a really good player, but he's not a Kyle Tucker. Let's go out and trade for him. Let's go out and make that move. And if they re-sign him, that is essentially what the Cardinals model was. And that's where I will be curious to see, will the Cardinals go back to it? I know they keep talking about, hey, it's about developing these guys. We got to develop the next star. We got to develop the next star. You haven't developed a star internally since Albert. And that was more of a, I hate to say it, it's more of a hit of luck because he was such a late round pick. It's not like he was drafted, second overall, and the expectation was that guy was going to be that. That was a surprise from the Cardinals organization that they got that from Albert Pujols. Outside of that, it's been go out and trade for Matt Holliday, go out and make these external moves to bring in these stars to help the organization, and then you can re-sign them. That, to me, is still what their formula should be, whatever the next version of the St. Louis Cardinals will look like.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of remained to be seen right now. And the part that will be really interesting is when you get a healthy Ivan Herrera back into the lineup, because he was looking like it before his injury took place. But when you get Herrera back in, which I would anticipate probably later this weekend, if not the start of next week's series, can he, for the rest of the season, look like that middle-of-the-order bat that we thought he was going to be at the beginning of the year? Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get to the rewind in about 15 minutes and also give you a shot to win some Post Malone and Jelly Roll tickets, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But coming up next, the Blues conversation yesterday was, the noticeable areas of the third pair defensively. I don't think they're going to be a topic after this game tonight. I think the topic's going to be the top four, and I'll explain next here on
ESPN.
So we had a long conversation yesterday about the Ryan Suter-Nick Leddy pairing and the struggles that they had in that first period that led to 2 Winnipeg Jets goals. And with Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Game 6, no change on that side. They're keeping Suter and Leddy together. It's as I expected. It was a rough first period. They were fine in the second and third. You hope that they're better in game number 6. And frankly, you're just not going to go to Matt Kessel. Nothing against Kessel. He just hasn't played a whole lot. And in a playoff game, an elimination one, you want experience on the back end. It's
100%.
what kept them in the playoffs. But T-Bone, tonight's game, to me, I don't feel like has anything to do with that third pair. Now, if they're on the ice for a couple of goals against, then we might be singing a different tune on Monday. But to me, this one's going to come down to your top 4. Because we saw on home ice Fowler jumping in on the play, Parayko jumping in on the play, Falk jumping in on the play, Broberg jumping in on the play. We saw those 4 guys shift the dynamic of that game. And what we didn't see in game number 5 was the defenseman get involved with the rush. You haven't seen Parayko play north of 20 minutes at all in this series. Some of that is probably, managing his minutes for how injured he was going into this and the injury that kept him out for a while. But also you're trying to just continue to keep that sustained zone time and ice time for a lot of your depth. Tonight feels like you're going to see a lot of Parayko, a lot of Fowler, a lot of Falk, and a lot of Nick Leddy. And frankly, it's what drives the offense. If your second line's going to score, if your third line's going to score, it's going to start from your defense. I think you're going to see a lot of those top 4 tonight and maybe less of Suter and Leddy because of the offense that they can provide.
Yeah, I think tonight is the one because you're at elimination now. You really push the horses, right? You got to see if you can get them just a little bit more juice squeezed from that lemon and see if they can provide a little bit more offense. Make sure they stabilize things defensively, which your top 4 have been pretty good defensively throughout this series. But you're right. I think this is going to come down to the top 4 because if we're talking about just the third pairing, what that tells me is that the top 4 weren't driving offense. And that was the storyline, as you said, in Game 5. It wasn't until really, I'd say, the third period when the defense kind of got up into the rush and were helping to drive offense with the forwards, because when the Blues are playing their best hockey, it's when they are playing positionless hockey. Their defensemen are all over the offensive zone. They can be behind the net, in front of the net, at the blue line where they typically are. But yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be more about your top 4. And to the top 4's credit, Cam Fowler's been great in this postseason. To see have another big game here on home ice. That second pairing of Falk and Broberg. Falk, I felt like didn't have a great game in Game 5. Can he provide some more offense for you here in this one? And Broberg, who hasn't been on the ice, he had the great nugget earlier in the show, hasn't been on the ice for an even strength goal against.
Yeah.
If your top 4 can provide offense, you can get more shot attempts towards goal. I'm not saying it's got to be the 31 they had in Game 3, though that would be nice.
That would be beautiful. We'll take it.
Game. If they can get about 20-plus shot attempts in this one, and not just from your top 4, but from your defense as a whole, I think you're going to see the Blues at their best then and be able to potentially win Game 6 here tonight.
Yeah, I tweeted this out earlier. Broberg has not been on the ice for an even strength goal against. He is the only defenseman that has played every game in the playoffs that has not been on the ice for an even strength goal against. And I know a lot of people's reaction is, well, it's because of, or it's not thanks to be the pairing mate that he has in Justin Falk. Justin Falk, prior to that Game 5, had not been on the ice for an even strength goal against. The one goal that he was on for was the shift after Broberg got the puck off of his inside of the skate, skipped a shift, they put Leddy out there, and Falk was on the ice with Leddy that the goal went in. Falk and Leddy have actually been a shutdown pair for the Blues and the Winnipeg Jets, which is why Parayko and Fowler have thrived, because Fowler's got 9 points in this series, which is the most by a defenseman in the postseason right now. He and Parayko have combined for, I believe it's 13 points, and on top of all of that, they've also been on the positive side of goal differential at even strength. So the top 4 defensemen are the engine of this Blues team. And why the Tyler Tucker thing felt like it was so impactful in Game 5, because he was the extra pair that you weren't expecting to continue to keep the offense rolling. Yeah, and to that point, it was what Joey told us yesterday, right? Which was it was just simple hockey from Tyler Tucker when he was on the ice. You knew exactly what he was doing. He was going to bring physicality. He was also, to your point, going to bring that little extra offense that right now you just don't expect it from the third pair, right? We're not expecting Suter or Leddy provide a bunch of offense for the Blues tonight. So that's what made feel so important when they lost Tyler Tucker. And as we were trying to
explained yesterday with that third pairing. The third pairing, you're not expecting them offensively, but they can't be making the mistakes they made in Game 5 in their own end, and that was a problem for them. But, yeah, the top 4 tonight for the Blues, it's simple. It's an easy thing to say. It's a cliche, but it is so true. The Blues' best players need to be their best players tonight, and that especially is true on with their top 4 defensive pairs.
Yeah, well, and they're going to have to be ready for speed because that's what Nikolai Ehlers provides. When he's in the lineup, he's fast, and you put him with Perfetti, you've got a lot of speed through the neutral zone that the defense is going to have to stay with, which makes it even more important to be skating with them and not take those stick infractions of tripping or holding so that you find yourself in the penalty box. You mentioned physicality, T-Bone, and it's one element we've talked so much about in this series, and it's an element that has to continue in this series. I don't think this will be the problem. I assume the Blues are going to play the exact same way that they've played from games 1 through 5, and the Jets are prepared for it. But the one thing I don't want to see happen is let what happened in Game 5 force the Blues to pull the reins a little bit. And what I mean by that is the Schenn hit on Scheifele and the controversy of, was it Schenn that injured Scheifele? Was it Faksa? Schenn should be suspended. You don't want to pull the reins back and say, okay, let's not be as physical because we don't want that narrative surrounding the team. The only way you're winning this series, the only reason you've been in this series is because of the physical play. And this isn't meant to sound cruel, but if you're the Blues, what you've been doing has worked. It has started to show that Winnipeg is paying the toll of the physical game. Scheifele gets injured. We've seen Logan Stanley get injured. Ryan Didoshak told us a couple of days ago that Josh Morrissey, it's noticeable he's playing differently because the Blues are finishing the checks. You've got to continue that physicality and, frankly, ramp it to another level because the Winnipeg Jets expect it, but the Winnipeg Jets will pounce on if you stop trying to play the physical game against them.
Yeah, and I agree. You don't want to change your game, even though it is an elimination game. And typically we see as series go along, teams kind of abandon that physicality. I think the Blues, and you've said this a bunch, they thrive on that, right? This is their style of play. They want to get into the body blows and really lay those hits, and especially with Ehlers coming back tonight, you got to test him, right? That is just playoff hockey. How healthy is he really? This is the first day he shed the non-contact jersey here at practice. Think about that. This guy, when he has been skating saying, nobody can touch me right now because I'm recovering from injury, and he is just going to leapfrog into the starting lineup in Game 6 of the playoffs. So, yeah, you've still got to bring that physical edge to the game, and I expect the Blues will do that, and that's when a lot of their players are playing their best. That's when Jake Neighbors is playing his best hockey. That's when Zach Bolduc is playing his best hockey. We've talked about the secondary pieces all season long. And the other thing when we talk about physical hockey, what we're also talking about is you got to get in front of the net. Yeah. And they kind of got away from that a little bit in Game 5, and that was noticeable of, hey, they weren't doing a good enough job, in my opinion at least, of taking away the eyes of Connor Hellebuyck. They were great at that in Games 3 and 4 here on home ice. So that will be the other aspect of this is they've got to get in front of Hellebuyck, and they've got to make sure that they can keep people away from Jordan Binnington.
And why that physicality is so important, too, is Winnipeg is already frustrated because of the Mark Scheifele scenario, I would imagine. And a couple of more physical plays forces them to maybe take that extra hack or take that extra post-whistle pushback, and that's how you generate opportunities on the power play. If the Blues just continue to play that style, which, again, I don't expect any changes. The WTF line plays one way, and it's why they generate offense. I think Matthew Joseph is going to provide more of that physicality, and then Schenn, Neighbors, and Kyrou, we mentioned it earlier in the show, they've been one of the best offensive lines in terms of generating scoring chances. They've done it with the physicality of Brayden Schenn and Jake Neighbors. It's dominating the front of the net. It's following through on checks, and that's where you can really be advantageous against this Winnipeg Jets squad. Again, if you're just joining us, Matthew Joseph is expected to go back into the lineup. Nikolai Ehlers expected as well. A game-time decision for the Winnipeg Jets, but he shed his no-contact jersey, was skating on the power play and the second line, so those are some line changes that are expected. And Mark Scheifele will not be playing, did not travel with the team from St. Louis after that first period where he got hit by Schenn and Faksa. By the way, Ryan Didoshak, a buddy that we had on earlier this week from the Winnipeg Jets perspective, has been texting back and forth with him, and talked about how, look, Scheifele is an engine for this team, and good luck sustaining the same type of play that they did in Game 5 versus Game 6. But I did find this nugget pretty impactful that he sent. He said the Jets have not won a playoff game without Scheifele in the lineup. He was suspended against the Montreal Canadiens for 4 games. They were swept in that series. And then the bubble year, when they played the Calgary Flames, Matthew Tkachuk injured Mark Scheifele. The Jets were swept in those games. So this team has not had success without Mark Scheifele, and with the depth that have played so far in their postseason history. It's why the Blues potentially could pounce on this one. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll give you an opportunity to win Post Malone and Jelly Roll tickets, plus give you our final thoughts on the Rewind next here. closing things down here from Enterprise Center as we are broadcasting until 6 o'clock tonight. The Fast Lane coming up next here from Enterprise Center. Big shout out to Doty, who has been helping us up here in the broadcast booth. We've got our First Community Credit Union pregame starting at 6 o'clock, all the way up through puck drop and postgame tonight here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN. And if you missed anything from our show today, we talked with BT, we talked Cardinals with him, talked about Game 6 with Mike McKenna. Plenty of Blues conversation. You can check it out after the show up on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com. Our podcasts brought to you by the Schaefer Door Company, and of course our website, our ESPN app, I should say, brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Big shout out also to Jordan Deacon taking care of us back in our 101 ESPN studios. As now is your time to win a Post Malone and Jelly Roll ticket giveaway. If you were listening earlier in the show today, T-Bone brought up the idea of 100 men taking on one gorilla. Out of the two of us, which one believed that was possible? Me or T-Bone? You send that one in, and if you're Texter 101, you'll win a pair of tickets to go see Post Malone and Jelly Roll at Busch Stadium on May 13th. Text in now, 314-399-9646. They're on sale now. You can find all the details and a bonus chance to register to win free tickets over on the show page at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 ESPN app. So, T-Bone, let's rewind it. Previewing Game 6 tonight. Nuggets in this one. Joseph going back in for Alex Texier. Nikolai Ehlers expected to be in the lineup. They're playing it as a game-time decision. My gut tells me Nikolai Ehlers is going to be playing in this one. I'll hone in on that one for a minute, T-Bone, because the injury that he had was a lower body injury to his foot, I believe it was. He ran into the official in the second to last game of the regular season, struggled to get off of the ice, had to be helped off of the ice. I don't believe he is 100%. Nobody's 100% at this point of the season. But to me, this feels a lot like a desperation move by Winnipeg. They know they can't afford to go back to Winnipeg for Game 7. You don't have Mark Scheifele, so you need Nikolai Ehlers in the lineup. And if that's the case, which again, tinfoil theory here, if I'm the Blues, I'm throwing everything I've got at him. He's not 100%. You can juice up that foot as much as you want, but as soon as you take a puck off of it or as soon as you get hit, that's when it really starts to sting. I'm taking shots from every situation possible, and I'm making sure I'm going to test how comfortable Nikolai Ehlers is back in the lineup.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think you've got to throw the body on him as much as possible when you can tonight. See if he is completely healthy and see – you get the vibe of how healthy he is, then I think it dictates what you want to do matchup-wise, right? Because they're without Scheifele. If Ehlers isn't 100%, can you take advantage of that line? I'll be curious to see how the Blues handle the matchups here on home ice tonight. That is the biggest thing that I've got my eye on. And I don't know about you. I feel like the second line's in for a big game tonight. We talked about the numbers. They've been very good. When you peek under the hood, they're not doing much at 5-on-5 in terms of points so far. But when you peek under the hood, they're doing a good job in the course. The expected goals very much in their favor. And then they also, Jordan Kyrou, we talked about it, has the most shot attempts so far out of anybody on the team. Mm-hmm. It feels like the second line is in for a big game tonight to potentially force a Game 7.
So let's do what we did with Mike McKenna earlier, T-Bone. If the Blues are to win tonight, Game 6, and force a Game 7 on Sunday, which, by the way, that game on Sunday, if they make it to that point, is a 6 p.m. puck drop out in Winnipeg. If the Blues force a Game 7, blank needs to happen.
The second line is the best line on the ice tonight. I will throw that as what I think is what has to happen because I think the top lines have been very even so far in this series, but I think the Blues will try and match up that Schenn line with Connor again. That's what they did in Game 3 and 4. They then kind of start to mix it around, but it was clear they wanted the Schenn line on them at first. I think the second line has to be the best line on the ice tonight, and then I think you have to be driving offense to where you force the Jets in the penalty box, and then you can take advantage on the power play. Those are the two things for me.
I like that one. For me, if they want to win this game tonight, the defensemen have to be active. And it seems so cliche because we've talked about it, but look at the difference of games 1, 2, and 5 versus games 3 and 4. The defensemen were in the offensive zone. Now, I don't know if this is going to result in them dumping the puck in, trying to go low to high and get those shots up and bodies in front of the net, or if they try and get the defensemen active on the rush. Because I can absolutely see Parayko, Falk, Broberg, Fowler, being a part of the odd man rush up the ice, being a part of the 5-man unit that's cycling the puck. To me, that's how you get to Connor Hellebuyck. That's how you make the Winnipeg Jets scramble in their own side. And we've seen in this series, when Winnipeg Jets are scrambling to get a hold of the puck, when they don't have the rush up the ice or the sustained zone time, that's when the mistakes take place. And the Blues capitalized on those big mistakes in games 3 and 4. It's something that we haven't seen them do in Winnipeg, but they can figure that out if they get to game number 7.
Yeah, and you mentioned Connor Hellebuyck. To his road woes continues going to be a huge storyline of this game. And I don't think that's anything that is like, oh, this is how the Blues win. If they can get back into Connor Hellebuck's head, and we mentioned it, Mike even said it too when we talked to the former NHL goalie Mike McKenna. He was fine. He was fine in the last game. But on the road, here in St. Louis, he's been pulled twice. What do the Jets do? Will they have a shorter leash on him, or will they say, hey, we're up 3-2, we let him be out there? We'll see if his road struggles continue, and then it's vice versa. Jordan Binnington's been excellent in this building ever since the Four Nations break.
Yeah, the Blues in their last 14 home games averaging 4.96 goals per game. On the Hellebuyck side, in the last 4 postseasons, going back to 2021, he's 5-14 overall, and he's lost his last 6 starts on the road, giving up an average of 4.83 goals per game. So I will talk to you at 6 o'clock for our pregame festivities. Again, a big thank you to Doty and Jordan Deacon for helping us out today. We will talk to you at 6 for our First Community Credit Union pregame, but Fastlane coming up next here from Enterprise Center.